Alex.
Yo, Steven, what up?
What up, dude? Long time no talk.
Long time no talk. I had a feeling I'd talk to you again, though.
Yeah, man. I've peeked at your, checked in on you on Facebook every once in a while, seen your adventures, and which has looked enticing. I put in my headphones. Hang on 1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
Are you there?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
All right, cool.
Yeah,
I've done the same.
I've done the same with you over the years. When was the last time we talked? We met the first time at Thousand Hills in Roswell, I believe. Coffee shop. And I think that was 2015. Does that sound right?
I'm not sure. It had to have been because I can pinpoint that time because I remember I went through this like really I won't call it traumatic, I'll call it dramatic breakup with somebody. And that was right when I was 35. So yes.
In Florida, right?
Mess for like a year. Yeah, man, that was some crazy shit. So I just it's funny how that can happen. Even we were only in a relationship for like a month, but it threw me off for like a year afterwards.
Yeah, dude, I know that game. I know that game. It's hard. It's hard to like. I don't know. It's funny. I was having this conversation actually last night with someone about like. I don't know. Maybe this sounds a little like I don't know woo woo or I know it's not gonna be too woo woo for you, but I don't have like a profound way to say it. But it's like when you expose yourself to other people's energies, you can get drawn in pretty quickly.
Oh yeah.
And if that all of a sudden gets taken away, it can be devastating. It makes you feel like adrift.
It's a different. I feel like. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I don't know if it's like best to just like abstain from exposing yourself to other people's energies. That doesn't seem right, but that's basically the situation I've found myself in, and I'm sure a lot of people have found themselves in. Throughout COVID is like, I love being around human beings. And I love, like vibing off of people's energies and kind of riding that energetic wave of being around humans. But I'm not going to lie, man. It's kind of nice to have the stability of like just worrying about your own kind of energetic journey and not, certainly there's not there's not like the highs of forming a new exciting relationship or being around exciting, fun people. There's not that highs, but there's also not the lows, which is what you were just referring to about like that breakup you went through. There's none of that. I've been saying like throughout quarantine, and my current situation is pretty quarantined. Throughout these past several months, it's like I'm a steady, emotionally like 6.5 out of 10. And I never really dip much lower than that. I never go much higher. I'm just kind of like, I'm not sad. I'm not particularly happy. But I'm cool. Like everything's cool. I have food on the table and a roof over my head, and I live in Southern California. The sun's always out, so I'm good.
Oh, nice. It's like a little bit less than good, but a little bit better than okay.
Exactly.
So, so in terms of your podcast, are you recording right now?
Yeah, I'm recording right now.
Oh, okay. So this is so whatever I say I should commit to, huh?
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right. No,
that should just be your way of operating in the world. Yeah, get into character now.
It almost always is, but I'm in a pretty strange situation. Anyways, I could tell you about some other time. But to what you were just saying, I made a decision. I've been celibate and no intimate relationships at all for 4.5 years. And
so since basically that breakup.
A little, well, it had to have been, so after that breakup, I got in a relationship for about 10 months.
Okay.
So, and then, you know, and right after that breakup. So the last time we had coffee, it was probably right before I hit the road.
Yep,
and
it was.
Okay, so I hit the road, was living out of a tent, and I was real depressed.
Yep.
And about a month into the road, I ended up meeting somebody. And then, you know, over the next couple months, we got it going. And so I did that for about 10 months. And, you know, we had a lot of love for each other. It was really intense. It was fun. But it was also, you know, I mean, it was whatever, you know, like, it's just like the story of my life. It was all over the map. And I was just like, you know what I realized? I was like, it was a couple of things. One of them was what you were just saying. Like, I want the stability of kind of being in control of like I just feel thrown off when I'm doing relationships, and like I'm all over the place. And I was like, I don't like that anymore. And it's not worth it to me to do that. And then I was like, I'm 35 or 36. And I've been in 20 relationships, and all of them have failed. So I don't want to keep doing things that I fail at.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah. Yeah.
And so I was just like, and then the big realization for me was that means I can't have sex with anybody, because I know, look, a lot of people can have sex and do it in all kinds of varieties of relationship formats or casual sex. Not me. I have sex and we're in a relationship. That's been the story of my life. So, so that was like, I have to actually just commit to stopping that completely, including like all forms of affection, unless I can sort of get to a place where I'm emotionally different and can handle it. But I'm not there yet. So anyway, so I had to do that. And that was the thing that kind of freed me from falling into another relationship, you know, like now that now that I know that that's just not something I do, I never take another step when I meet someone and there's like that energy, you know, like I've got super good boundaries around it. So yeah. It's hard.
Fascinating.
I'm not gonna lie.
I immediately am ecstatic that I reached out to you to do this, because that is exactly the type of stuff. I mean, that's fascinating to me. Okay. So how has that been? Like, are you able to compare your life experience? And I know there's other variables involved always in life other than just romantic relationships, but like, what has that experience been like versus, you know, the previous 30, 35 years, whatever it was of, you know, or I guess not 35 years, 20 years, of being involved romantically with people? Do you find yourself happier? Do you find yourself more stable? Is it like what I was referring to just now with the quarantine thing? Like, there's no highs, but there's also no lows. Like 4.5 years. And quite frankly, I could see myself doing something like that. I mean, I've kind of done that for the past 9 months. There's been two or three little, like, just kind of like spontaneous rendezvous that just kind of came out of nowhere. And I am the type of person, I can turn it off and on. It can just be sex for me. But honestly, if you'd have told me I would have got 9-10 months, essentially with really no social interaction and virtually no romantic interaction, I would have told you, dude, I will lose my mind. I'm going to go insane. I'm going to be running through the streets with my underwear on my head. Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. But like I said, dude, it's been all things considered totally fine. And I'm perfect. Yeah. Honestly, these past 9-10 months have been, and I've said this before in the podcast, these past 9-10 months might be the longest period of sustained psychological stability of my entire life, essentially. I mean, other than like elementary school, where it's just like, you know, elementary school was fine. And then right kind of when I entered adolescence, I felt like I started to lose my mind a little bit. These past 9-10 months with very little to consider outside of my immediate little bubble here has been very stable. So has this 4.5 years
really interesting.
Very interesting. I'm shocked. I'm truly shocked by it. And like, now that in conversation with the people that I live with, we've kind of we've made the decision that it's cool for us to take at least a little step outside of quarantine. And for instance, like I'm entertaining the possibility of like maybe starting to date again. And I've been talking to a few people. I haven't gone on any dates, but even that, like re-engaging in that and the type of energy it takes to set up a date and go through the small talk and, wade through those shallow waters of any beginning relationship I'm like, ugh, fuck it, man. Like, I'd rather just go back into quarantine or whatever. So how has your celibacy experience been? Has it been a positive or a negative?
Yeah, well, look, it's been overwhelmingly positive. But let me just say, I think it's cool that you're thinking through this stuff, because one thing I discovered was, at least in my experience, I never got like a message anywhere or a cultural signal that, choosing something like that was something that was even like possible. It was like all the signals were like, obviously you do relationships, you do it until you find the right one to marry, or if you're polyamorous, maybe you do it in a different way, but it was like all the cultural signals were built around, life was about relationships, and particularly intimate relationships.
For sure, yeah.
So it took me until I was like 35 or 36 to realize I don't have to do that. Like there's a whole other, thing I could do. And now that I've gone this other way, I've also found, like good literature out there from people that talk about this, about, choosing to be alone, and not for religious reasons, but doing it for other reasons. And frankly, I mean, I think people, it's sort of, there's this myth that like, oh, people choose to be alone too, to like be a rugged individual. Honestly, for me, like the choice to be alone was I just can't emotionally handle relationships. It's actually that, and when people are like, well, you can do all of the work, the depth work, and resolve all that, and it's family issues. I'm like, I don't like working. I don't really want to do the work, actually. I work hard enough, like other
right.
people, like
I don't need another job or whatever.
Jesus, and like so I don't like the stress of that either, and so yes, it's been overwhelmingly positive. The thing that's tricky is learning how to be alone and not to be overwhelmed by loneliness. So I've developed like a lot of strategies for this, and it's taking time. Like I would say I've had to get the hang of it. So for me to get to the point where I could just be like, I'm done with relationships, I had already had to do a bunch of kind of practice. Like I've spent a lot of time in nature by myself and tried to figure out how to be with myself without that kind of stuff. And then since I made the decision, I've had to kind of maintain that practice. Like when I have waves of loneliness, I have strategies of things I can do to not make a stupid decision, like to just hang in there. And so that's really helped. I plan to do it for the rest of my life. I mean, I don't know if I will, but I'm, 4.5 years in is a long time, and look, I'm a sexual being, so that's kind of hard, but, and I don't know, I've been learning about other relationship formats, and I'm interested in exploring that. I'm just not there yet because I don't really trust myself. So around that kind of stuff, but yeah, like it's, I mean, Alex, like for me at least, like ever since I was a young teenager, at least, like I've been an artist in one capacity or another. And that's what I want to be doing in the world, is just engaging with creative arts. And that's what gives me the most fulfillment. And it's hard to do that and uphold all these other commitments if you're, a lot of artists are just really intensely focused or obsessive about what they're doing, and part of that is having a lot of control over one's time. And so I just see that as superseding, the kind of commitment I'd have to make to an intimate relationship. I mean, I know that there's artists out there that do intimate relationships really well, and they give a lot of space to each other. But like I said before, I don't do well with all that. Like if I get into an intimate relationship, space hurts to me and all that stuff. So anyway, so it's just like I've realized all these things over time. I've set up like, this is how I want to do it. And then I've erected really stiff boundaries. Like I know that I don't pursue things past a certain point, and it's been better. It's been good.
Oh, so I have a ton of questions. My first question is, you kind of just alluded to it right there as you were finishing. So you have had situations where you've met someone, encountered someone, and you feel, you get that feel. It's an indescribable feeling, like, oh, there's a connection here. And once again, it's an energetic connection. And you felt that, or you felt an attraction, be it physical or otherwise, and you tell yourself, no, Stephen, like, tread lightly. We've been down this road before, and you hold back. Wow.
Yeah. I've made a mistake around, having some affection, nothing that was not even like kissing, but like touch and stuff like that, like holding people. And even that is too much for me. So that was a good learning lesson. I can't even do that because it triggers.
Wow.
I don't know if activates too much of me. So I have had it. I mean, but like, I don't know if I could have done it in my 20s. I mean, by the time you're 35, you've had a lot of relationships, you've had sex with, a bunch, and it's just kind of like, then I could be like, okay, well, I've got a lot of this out of my system. Is this something I want or not? Where in my 20s, I think I was still really trying to understand my body, like what brings me joy, like what I could offer somebody. Like I had to really realize I cannot offer somebody the kind of commitment that is sort of culturally
expected.
Expected. Yeah. Like that ain't me. So anyways, and
go
ahead.
No, you go.
Well, I was just going to say, I've been hurt, but I also hurt somebody pretty bad, in my early 30s. And that was a real wake up call to me. Like, man, this stuff is like, it can be magic. It can be poison. There's a lot of energy in it. And I don't actually want to hurt somebody either. Like where, like it sucks to be in a relationship where the love is flowing one way and, like, on both sides, like where somebody else is like, look, I'm not interested in you, you love them. But also when you're not interested in them and they love you and like you have to hurt them. Like that really sucks. So I just don't really. I think it's a lot more traumatizing than people give credit to. I think there's a lot of emotion, collective emotion floating around where people have been heartbroken a bunch in their lives. And some people that's really devastating. And this format of going through 5, 6, 7 heartbreaks in your life or in a decade, this is new in our culture. Now, it's better than sort of what we had before, which was like, very repressive and oppressive. But I'm not sure that this whole way of doing things where it's like, go out and date everybody and have sex with everybody and figure out, I'm not sure all that stuff is the right approach either.
Yeah, you kind of like stumble into your late 20s, early 30s, like battered, bruised, and broken, and like so tired and fatigued that like the next even semblance of a stable relationship, you're just like, all right, fine, I'll stay with this person forever because I just don't have the energy to like get back out there in the marketplace, And I think everyone, it's like this. It is like this, from what I can see, and I hate speaking like authoritatively, but everything I say on this podcast, I feel like I'm always offering the caveat that's like, listen, I have, and kind of the impetus to start this podcast was like, I'm entering adulthood. I have no fucking idea what's going on. And what I do see going on is kind of like the typical paradigm for adult existence in Western society. It doesn't, there's a ton of it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and a lot of it really doesn't resonate with me. And paramount among that is like this kind of monogamy, marriage, life partnership structure that pervades our entire existence, and that marriage, like reproduction, child rearing thing it seems to be like the ultimate goal of all of our existence, which that makes sense in some sense, right? Like we need to like keep humanity alive, but also it's like, it's 2020. We don't have a shortage of humans. Like we could probably go we could probably go without, you know, a significant portion of us not pursuing reproduction or marriage as like the singular focus of our existence, or the primary, not singular, but the primary focus of our existence. I don't know, but it seems like everyone is still in that model. And to me, it doesn't, at least right now, I feel like I do want to have kids, but the whole concept of marriage and life partnership doesn't make much sense to me. And I don't know. It's I look at life like this ball of clay. I'm starting to develop this image of life, like existence being this ball of clay. And particularly in the Western developed world where our survival is kind of a given, and we kind of operate under this notion that like birth to retirement is kind of a given. It seems it seems like life is, you can mold this ball of clay basically into whatever you want with some like limitations of physics. But in order to mold that ball of clay into something, it requires concerted effort and concerted like exertion of energy. And so, for instance, if you want to become a doctor, you need to exert your energy in a focused way on this ball of clay and turn it into the shape of a doctor. But at the same time, if you want to start a family, then you need to like cut the ball of clay in half and then also start building like the shape of a family while building the shape of a doctor. And for me, what I'm noticing is like I shoot my energy off to make the shape of a family, and it sounds like you're having a similar experience. It all just kind of like explodes into a bunch of little clay pieces that now are just kind of scattered around the floor. And next thing I know, I'm like trying to sweep them back up, and I'm apologizing for like crumbling the clay. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. You know. And it's like after time and time again of doing that, I'm like, man, should I really even be? Why do I keep trying to shoot my energy off into creating this like romantic form, whatever form it takes? Maybe, and what you have done, maybe I should just like bring all of my energy back to me, kind of restart from fresh, like turn this ball of clay back into just a spherical nothing, and reconcentrate all of my energy into very specific paths. Like I can't scatter my energy in that kind of diverse of direction. Yeah. So I don't know. It seems like I don't know if a ton of people are very conscious of that in that sense. I feel it seems to me, and I don't mean to be critical, and I don't mean to like, I'm not trying to hate on anyone. I'm just offering my observations of my life experience. It seems a lot of people are marching down that formation of long-term romantic monogamous relationship path sheerly out of like historical momentum rather than out of like genuine reflection or like genuine silent reflection on who they want to be and what they want their, you know, singular unique life experience to be. It seems like people are just kind of marching in the footpaths of those who came before them rather than taking a step back and reflecting on, wait a second, is this actually how I want to invest my finite time and energy here on this rock? So I don't. It's very. This is why I want to talk to people like you who are. And I didn't even know this whole celibacy thing before I even picked up the phone. It's very interesting that you have. So it's fascinating to hear you say that, and it's also equally fascinating because we came in contact because of more of our mental health history and a shared desire to explore alternative ways of treating the mind, or alternative ways of viewing psychology and psychiatry. And that's how we connected. Right. And since over the last 5 years, I've kind of gained a relative sense of psychiatric stability as far as the pills are concerned. And so I was very interested to see like where this conversation went. I do want to touch on that stuff, obviously, with you, but it's interesting that the first thing that you bring up is the celibacy point, because honestly, that has been my most recent life revelation, is being, involuntarily in quarantine all of a sudden, but realizing like, hey, I'm totally cool not hanging out with girls or like, not having, sex or whatever. it's very interesting that we continue to have these parallel experiences, although they manifest in different forms.
Yeah, you're somebody that I've had that. I've only a handful of people in my life that I've, it's funny because we could check in after 5 years and find that some of the same questions, we're posing some of the same questions to ourselves. Yeah. And, look, I think part of this too, like when you were talking about like people like doing the whole path of the sort of culturally permissible path of, marriage and kids and a single family home and that kind of stuff, that's still like the overwhelming option or reality that people grow up in and see. So I think part of it's just having other paths. I mean, when I think back to being a kid, my mom loved nature, and that was really cool because that helped me connect with nature. And I was also in the suburbs, and I didn't really have an understanding of nature, but it was like reading when our high school teacher introduced us to Henry David Thoreau and reading someone that went and lived in the cabin. Now, I mean, that's a really problematic story because he wasn't really in the wild, but that doesn't matter. But learning about that opened me up to, wow, this is another path that a person can take. And then I had the idea was out there. And I think part of it's like with the information age and all this stuff, all these paths are now there on the internet. I mean, in a very real way, like you couldn't even understand other relationship formats 100 years ago. I mean, it was just, the concepts were not there for a lot of people. Now, I mean, a lot of people, I should say, the relationship format that we have in the mainstream United States is actually relatively new. It's evolutionarily new. It's not probably what our ancestors did for tens of thousands of years. It's not what a lot of indigenous cultures have or had. And so it is a very peculiar kind of format we have that we take as normal. Like this whole thing about like, go ahead.
I think you're about to get onto it. I don't know how much like knowledge you have on the subject. I have no actual knowledge on the subject. Once again, all of this nonsense that I'm spewing out of my mouth is purely based on my own particular experience. I don't have any like actual academic basis for what I'm saying. Do you know like where like what period in time it stems from? Were there any historical like antecedents that led to kind of this modern relationship format that we have? What do you know about where this all came from? Is it biblical? Like, what do you know?
Well, yeah, okay, so I know some stuff, and I should just, but I'm a generalist in general, meaning that I like to study a lot of subjects. So I'm not, aside from mental health, I don't really have expertise in any particular area. So I might say some stuff that's off. And the other thing is that when I do learn about how other cultures have practiced relationships, I'm often learning about it through anthropologists, through the anthropologic gaze, and that's problematic. I try and read, if I'm learning about another culture, read people from that culture, right? But it's not always the way that I can do it. So, I mean, my understanding is that there's been a huge diversity of relationship formats that other cultures have done over time. So, I mean, if you just go back 3,000 years ago, but even now and even 100 years ago, but so much now is kind of hegemony of like there's like global capitalism in the United States, like a lot of cultures have been changed or colonized. But if we go back, for instance, like raising a child, you've probably heard the cliche of like, it takes a village to raise the child, but like, but what that could look like, for instance, is things like there's several mothers in a small group who have just given birth, and they actually breastfeed each other's children. And just think about how different it becomes when you're a baby and your entire worldview is not isolated to this woman and this man, but to a whole variety of people. You grow up with a different kind of psychology like that. I think a much more probably secure psychology. Yeah, there was a lot of kind of what we would think of as polyamory, people having multiple partners, of there being a lot more flexibility around the edges of sex, around sleeping with other people. And, my understanding is that the kind of format that we have, the marriage, came from patriarchy. And I don't mean that as some vague social justice concept. I mean, literally, patriarchy means rule by the father. And that was literally a format that happened after human beings started farming. You know, before that we were hunting and gathering. Once we started farming, the entire structure of relationships changed dramatically. And, you know, people started farming about 10,000 years ago from what's known. It could have been further back. And that started to change it. And not all farmers are the same. So some farming cultures did a little bit of this and did that. But, you know, the format that we've kind of inherited in the dominant kind of Western culture, you know, it was ruled by the father, and it had to do with passing down land, like land ownership. I don't quite understand the complexities of it. But like the whole thing, but there still was for a long time much more of a village raising children kind of mentality, and that just has become more and more isolated to where it's very atomized now. I mean, you know, starting with the sort of birth of the suburbs and the mid 1900s in the United States. I mean, now the thing is, like, a family lives in a house. And I mean, even the structure of a house has changed. They used to be built with front porches because the idea was you go out on your front porch, you'd see your neighbors. And now they don't build front porches, they build backyards. Everyone wants a backyard, a fenced off place where you can be, you know, kind of like have your own space. And so it's really gotten into this intense place of atomization, like that, you know, it looks like two parents, you know, in a house with a kid or two, and they do the family in the house. And then when they go out of the house, they're in a different environment and they have to put on different roles. And, you know, I mean, that's not how communities and societies were built for a long time. You didn't have these like roles that you played. You didn't go to school and put on your school self. You didn't go to work and put on your work self. So, you know, like this, it's just all become kind of compartmentalized and complex and all that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, you can probably hear this helicopter. Maybe they're watching me.
No, I don't.
But
no, I don't. It's all good. So far, so good. This is great. I'm literally just recording this on my phone. You're on your phone, and I have just like a little call recording app. So, pretty rugged setup. But no, you sound great. When you use this term atomization, is that like reference to like the nuclear family? Is that what you're?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like yeah. I might be using.
This is my atom. That's your atom. You're a different atom. I'm this atom type of deal. And it seems like
I mean,
that would.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Go ahead. I think what I was going to say back to it seems like to me what would just make most sense, like if humanity started tomorrow, or let's just, God forbid, like humanity is entirely wiped out and we have to like begin anew. It does seem like what would make the most sense is like we're all a unified community. Everyone's having sex with one another. Quite frankly, you don't even really know who your kids are. So like maybe some of them look more like you than other ones do. So maybe that one's yours because like I have a big bulbous nose and that kid looks like he has a fat nose too. So maybe that one's mine. But like therefore, like you treat all of the kids like your kids, and like you said, all the mothers are breastfeeding everyone. Everyone's having sex with everyone. All of the kids are everyone's raising all of the kids in a very like traditional sense, right? The men are providing all of the food for everyone. The women are providing all the caretaking. I'm not suggesting any sort of like reversion to gender roles or whatever, but it seems to me like that sort of system just makes more sense. Just like intuitively, I'm like, that would make more sense. And when I think of this concept of like, oh, you're going to meet one person, and because you guys had like a good time for a year or two, you're now going to make the decision that this is your one person for until literally you fade from existence. Like what? Wait, you don't know who you're going to be 10 years from now, or let alone 10 days from now, or like why that whole concept of like, hey, we've had fun for the past, several months. Like, let's do this forever. And like, let's sign a contract before the government and make a promise to God. Like what? Like, where did that makes no sense to me. And once again, I'm not trying to hate on anyone. I'm not trying to like be condescending or holier than thou or seem like I have some sort of like enlightened guru. Just literally, it doesn't make sense. Like that. What? Where did that? It seems totally artificial and fabricated. It doesn't. I don't know. It just doesn't resonate with me on any level.
Well, it's not working well for a lot of people. There's no data suggesting that marriage.
So then on top, that's the other craziest part about it. On top of that, we have very clear empirical data that half of people this doesn't work, and so it's like yet we continue to perpetuate it. That's when I honestly do start going down a path of like psychological instability, because then I start to think like I'm living in a fucking like simulation. None of this makes any sense. I must be, player one in this simulation, and everyone else is running some sort of psychological experiment on me. Like, and I know that's not, especially with your mental health experience, those aren't like healthy thoughts to hear or to have. But honestly, when you add like the divorce rate data on top of how non-intuitive the whole concept of marriage is, I'm like, what the fuck is going on out here?
Jesus. I mean, absolutely. And at least, in sort of liberal democracies where people have the option of getting divorced and stuff, you're right. The statistics don't bear it out. And it is, why would we keep doing something that's not working well? But I mean, this is across the board, right? Like, I mean, why don't we have universal health care when our current healthcare system is a absolute disaster? I mean, you just look at all the data and stuff. I mean, look, I grew up around a lot of like television and movies and, and the internet. I mean, the internet's different because it can show you a lot of different views. But I just think those media messages are very strong about what something should look like. For instance, I mean, it's not like we're going to have a president who's like, oh, yeah, I'm in a polyamorous relationship. My primary partner is interesting, but like I'm going to have another person move in to help take care of the kids. Like we're not even close to stuff like that. And but we're starting to get some openings, and part of it is because the current format isn't working. But I also want to say it's also not working not just because of the format. It's because of the economic pressures people suffer, and also all the other oppressions that people face now. That as our society becomes harder economically for a lot of people, that creates so much stress on a relationship. We don't take care of families, and if we had economic policy that would actually take care and support families and offer child care and give, like they do in some European countries, give a parent like a year off for the first year of their baby, it's paid, all this stuff. Then I think we could have, I think we would see some of those numbers change. But still, it doesn't mean it's the only format, and there would still be a lot of it not working out for people. I mean, there's like you were saying earlier about the ball of clay and all these different choices. With the increase in choices for one's lifestyle, that I mean, even if you never leave your community or anything like that, you can still choose to be a whole lot of variations. Because you can learn about this now, like you can see it and be like, I'm not saying that anyone can choose to be anything. I mean, there's all these other social factors with that, but with all those choices, it obviously also becomes a lot harder to commit to a singular choice, basically around anything, like, oh, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Like that's a lot harder. And I think you have a crowd that sort of preaches like men have commitment issues and there needs to be like, like sort of make it about that. But I think that takes away, like make it about like individual men not being responsible. And there's plenty of that. But I also think that really takes away from, and I'm sort of, my frame of reference is heterosexual relationships. I should say that. But it's like, there's a lot of that, but I think it takes away from the kind of social structures and social pressures too, that, I mean, I don't know what kind of person I would have been. Like, I don't know, like you introduce Tinder into the world. That's going to have an effect on somebody's...
It's like a fucking nuclear bomb on the paradigm of monogamy in marriage, Seriously.
I mean, it's crazy, yeah.
It's like, it seems like there should be, as soon as Tinder is invented, there should be some, like, I don't know, the Illuminati should meet together and be like, whoa. We got to reevaluate this whole setup.
We crossed the line, yeah.
This is not sustainable any longer. They're going to catch on. Go ahead. Sorry. Interrupted you.
Well, so I mean, joke. Dude, like culturally, I think there's just enormous shifts happening for a lot of people, and there's not the blueprints that there used to be. It used to be for all of human evolution and culture that every culture on Earth had elders who handed down the tradition to their children and grandchildren, and there was sustainability. And we're living in a period where our grandparents now have grown up in such a different cultural environment, for the most part, that the traditions aren't being passed down. And this is probably the first time in human history, absent like cultures that went through severe trauma, that has actually happened, at such an accelerated rate. So and when you don't have the elder, like when that's not happening, then it's leaving a lot of individuals and young people to try and figure it out for themselves, And we don't know where that's going to go. I mean, it's just like a brave new world with that.
Yeah. It seems to me like the internet represents this from our parents' generation to our generation. I guess our generation was kind of the transitionary generation, right? Because you were born in what, 80? 81?
Yeah, that's right. 80, yeah.
You're my sister's age, right? And I was born in 88. So we both grew up without the internet. I didn't have internet in my house until 02, 01, 02. So we have the first half of my life was no internet. And so we're this transition generation. I love what you just said about the elders passing down the tradition. It's like we're all born looking for a path to follow. We're looking for guidance. We're looking for a template of what the fuck are we supposed to do here? We come out of this vagina kicking and screaming, and there's all these bright lights, and what the fuck is going on? And then this ball is whirling around the sun at a zillion miles an hour. It's like, wait, what am I supposed to be doing here? And then your grandma, your dad, so it's like, oh no, here's the 10 commandments, just follow these and you'll be good. And you're like, okay.
They're not giving you your grandma isn't giving you tips on your Facebook profile, for instance.
Exactly. All of a sudden the internet comes along, and it's like 2,000 years of human evolution occurred in a matter of 20 years, because all of a sudden we're all interconnected, and all of a sudden we have access to all of the information in the history of existence. And everyone has it. From a villager in fucking Somalia to, the president of the United States. They essentially have access to the same body of information and experiences.
Yeah.
And then so now all of a sudden this feeling that I'm about to delineate, I'm going to connect the dots to the internet here, is actually what brought me to you the first time. When I met you in the summer, I believe it was the summer of 2015, when I was really struggling psychologically, and my sister kind of pointed to you as this kind of wealth of experience and knowledge on the subject. My biggest struggle was indecision over what the next step in my life would be. And it got, the core of that everyone experiences. The core of that is oh man, it's time to graduate college. What should I do? Or I'm going to college. What should I major in? Or I've graduated college and I've worked in this job for 3 years and it's not that fulfilling. It's time to move on to something new. What should it be? That's essentially what I was experiencing. But I think I had just come off 7 years of being on Prozac, and then entered this transitioning period of life. And all of a sudden, it felt like my brain was just imploding on itself. And not only was I struggling with the decision, not only was I struggling with the decision of what should I do with my life, I would wake up in the morning and I was struggling with the decision of what should I have for breakfast? And that indecision would compound. And all of a sudden, I would, 3 hours later, I'm staring at a pantry. And I've literally spent the first 3 hours of my day debating back and forth whether to have oatmeal or have fucking French toast. And all of a sudden I was okay, something's wrong here, because now I also am starting to feel like I want to kill myself, because I'm doing this every morning, and it's this is not, I know I have this to look forward to every morning, and I'd rather not exist than go through this thought process every day. But I think a lot, if it were 1820, my options would have been so severely limited. I don't know if I ever would have engaged in, that kind of psychological downfall, because not only would there only have been fucking milk and, I don't know, apples to eat for breakfast. You know, my only professional opportunities would have been to, like, I don't know, join the military or be a farmer. So I think this, like, injection of the digital age into our existence, I don't know, maybe it is promoting more and more mental illness. It certainly felt like it did for me. I felt like and it sounds super soft actually at the same time, because it's like, oh, woe is you, Alex. Like, you're a white guy with a master's degree in the United States and you can't figure out what your next move is going to be, like what your next, you know, $50,000 to $100,000 job is going to be. Boo-hoo. But that's not what it feels like when you're going through it. When you're going through it, it feels like,
that's right,
like I'm not even in control of my own mind, and I just want to, like, turn off my mind forever. So
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, dude, I love all of that. I mean, I think and I do think that the nature of one's mind and shape, while it has a relationship to privilege and it can also, there's also, you know, having a crazy mind. Like, I used to have a lot of obsessions and ritualistic stuff. It got really, really severe. You know, like, absent my privilege, that was absolutely fucking horrifying. And so yeah. So, right, so the
sorry, real quick, real quick, just let me interject. And then once you become aware of your privilege, so like I just said, it's like you're struggling very hard, like you're experiencing very deep, dark struggle with, like, what your next move is going to be. And then all of a sudden you do become aware of your privilege, and you're like, then you become it compounds the psychological state, because then you're like, wait a second, not only am I struggling with this decision, I'm a little bitch. I'm a little bitch on top of the fact that I can't make this decision. I don't even deserve to be alive. Why am I taking up space and oxygen?
Well, even that evaluation mechanism, like, I'm a little bitch, you know, that's a cultural construct too. I mean, you know, that's like, it's really interesting that there's a guy named Michael White who invented something called narrative therapy, and he would talk about a lot of people he worked with who heard voices. Now, this is obviously not universal, but the voices that people heard were often hostile when they were hostile, because some people have all kinds of relationships, including good relationships with voice hearing. But the ones that were really tough, you know, kind of mimicked the state, the patriarchal, like, you're a little bitch kind of state. You know, like, became a voice in one's head. And there is all that kind of stuff. It is hard. Look, man, working through, like, becoming aware of privilege, working through what to do with that, trying to figure out, you know, what should I treat as an experience that feels really integral to me as a soul, and what should I treat as an experience that feels like it has been shaped, you know, by social constructs. And what should, you know, like, and of course every experience has both of those, but figuring all that is, you know, it's tough and it's necessary. And look, I think the culture is getting better at that way of thinking about it, although I'm really reticent about some of the ways that activism can be shaming of other people. I just find that format, you know, we're going to end up in a lot more violence if we keep going that route. So, and people would say to me, well, that's just a function of your privilege that you can even say that. Well, it might be, but it's still, you know, what I believe. It's the place I've come to. So, but anyways, you know, like, all that stuff is really tough to sort through. And like you said about the pantry options, it is very listen, a modern supermarket is a fucking spaceship compared to the past. Like, you know, like, what the hell is that? I can go in and get food from anywhere in the world, you know, and like, you know, I mean, it's bizarre. And so all of this new reality, we're taking the mind and emotional infrastructure that we evolved with, we're taking that and trying to apply it to something that's mismatched and it's new. And, you know, I mean, I imagine we'll get somewhere with it over time, but it's not guaranteed. We might end up in more chaos. I just wanted to say that one of the things that, I mean, like, obviously the internet's good and bad and all that kind of stuff, because it does wonderful things for some people. But one of my real worries about it is, just like the kind of neoliberal capitalistic economic structure, the internet is just like that economic structure has been kind of exported all around the world, often through violent means, so that almost every society now has an element of capitalism in it, right? I'm worried that the internet tends to promote a kind of universalism, like a oneness of culture, and so that if you so you can see this in like physical structure. What I was just saying about the economic stuff, that you travel to other countries, like a lot of the infrastructure, like the buildings, the stores, the ways people talk, it's becoming more and more homogenized. Dude,
the way people talk is one that is terrifying me. I interact with people both via text and face to face, and I'm like, wait, I know that's not your own words. Like, and people are using the same kind of phrases and words, and like, anyway, sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, and so look, if I just look at nature, what nature values is biodiversity, meaning a diversity of species. That's always the tendency of a natural ecosystem, wants to diversify. And there's a lot of reasons why, and like I love talking about them, but I won't go into it. But there's a lot of reasons why. And so what we need the internet to become is something that, if it's going to connect all of us, we need it to somehow promote diversity, not just of culture, but neurodiversity, of mind, of emotional diversity, of all kinds of diversity, so that we have more diversity as the end result rather than less. And so I don't know how we're going to get there, because it's not tending towards that right now. But that is a big challenge, I feel like, for the generations now, is that we have to figure out a way that this kind of global connection is not going to try and turn people all into one thing, which is often based on, white supremacist ideas. This is where some of the language coming out from Black Lives Matter and like in hitting the is very good in a lot of ways, obviously, to try and end racism, but getting into the particulars of like this monolithic idea about how we should relate to each other, what kind of economy we should have, what we should do in the morning, what we should do in the afternoon, has been very shaped by race, has been very shaped by gender, all that kind of stuff. So we got to peel all that back and figure out, how can this connecting force actually allow for diversity to flourish? And I'm not sure how we can.
Yeah, I don't need it. It seems it would. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. No,
because you're on your thought. You're on your thought. Even a lot of left wing. Go. This is your podcast. I talk plenty on this thing. You go.
Well, I just find so even in the U.S., so we you have left and right and these kinds of things, and one of the things that everybody takes for granted, not everybody, but a lot of people in dominant culture take for granted, is that that we can just ecologically do whatever we're doing. So this culture is being exported everywhere. It says that we can turn forests into houses, that we can dam rivers to get electricity, that we can divert the flow of water to farm, that we can plow over a meadow to raise cows on corn, that we can do X, Y, Z. And there's just an expectancy that it's going to keep working, that there'll be water in the tap, that there'll be food, all this stuff, right? And we've surpassed ecological limits, but now we're feeling it. And what I'm saying is that format for thinking about nature is horrifying, and that is being exported everywhere, because the capitalist neoliberal economic model we have does not say anything about the rights or value of nature, except to look at it as resources that can be converted into goods. And this is where I learn a lot from indigenous peoples, especially of Turtle Island, of the Americas, is that, indigenous peoples have held this kind of knowledge that shit ain't going to work out for since colonization, right? And so, those voices are really important to my way of thinking about the world, because, anyways, I just worry we're going to end up with a global view of ecology that's going to look at ecology just as resources, and it's just not going to work. Even the fucking climate change people, they're way too focused on carbon. They're like carbon, so we'll just have more solar panels. no, we all need to be using a lot less in the first world. Like it's not going to work out to just switch, all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to see this global culture. I don't like this oneness kind of thing. I think it's a bad idea.
Here's what I was. It would seem like the internet would automatically promote that diversity of thought, of diversity of all things, as you were saying. Like that is that is how nature tends. You would think intuitively, like, oh, everyone has essentially access to the same information. Everyone essentially has access to their own platform to share their own unique perspectives. But as you said, it doesn't seem, now that we're like, I don't know, how many years are we into like the digital age, to like internet is ubiquitous? I don't know, 25 years, maybe 20 years. For me personally, it's almost 20 years, so over a decade for sure. But it seems like there is a uniformity of thought, or if you want to take it just from a political perspective, there's a duality of thought. It seems like there should be an infinity of thoughts rather than either a monolithic structure of thinking or, a two sides of the coin. It seems like there should be infinite sides of the coin. What do you contribute that to? And like, I'm going to push you in the direction of commenting on like cancel culture and that sort of thing. It seems to me like there's almost this fear on the internet to say, it seems like there's two camps. Like, you need to be politically correct and, like, perpetually, like, infinitely open-minded and respectful, or you need to, like, give everyone the middle finger and tell them to fuck off. I don't know. It seems like kind of as far as, like, the digital communication, maybe this is just where my social media network is maybe it's too suburban heavy or too college educated heavy or whatever, but it seems like the winning narrative or the dominant narrative online tends to lean very left. Maybe I'm just interacting with the wrong people or whatever, but regardless, it's either dominantly left from my perspective or it's, left and right. It seems like there should be a million different perspectives, or literally 7 billion different perspectives, So what do you attribute that to?
I think the monolith is because the internet is subsumed and run within global corporate capitalism.
Right.
So in other words, Facebook is an American company that operates by economic principles. Yeah. So all of the algorithms and all that kind of stuff is going to shoot down from there. And it's hard to see this sometimes. I mean, it's kind of invisible because it's just, the way we think about business and all this stuff is normal. But so I don't know, so if the internet wasn't run by the economic system we had, and if it wasn't run, by the way, by by the state in the way that it's run in China either, then, and I don't know how it'd be run, but I believe the originators of the internet, or the people that got onto it in the 90s, they wanted it to be run by people on the ground. Like, it wouldn't fit into all those structures. And now that's becoming those structures, it's just become much more monolithic. And yeah, look, I mean, we got two political parties, basically. I mean, there's other ones, but, other countries have a lot of different political parties. Again, just like that whole relationship thing, it creates other avenues of being able to think about the world. Almost all political parties and at least in Western democracies, start with the assumption that capitalism has to be the way forward, and capitalism on its own, to me, is not necessarily harmful. It's just it has to say something about nature at the foundation, or else it's going to always be harmful. And but anyway, so yeah, in the cancel culture stuff, and I don't know what to say about all of that. I've spent a lot of the last few years trying to wrap my head around those debates going on. I mean, there's times where canceling somebody has felt good to me. I guess, look, I'll say this much. I've come back in the last year that I am a 100% free speech advocate. And again, people would say that's part of my privilege, and it is, but it's still what I believe. That I believe that the way to the best relations is not to censor speech. Now, if a college wants to, revoke somebody coming there, I have problems with that, but that still isn't the state doing it. If it's a state-run university, it's a different thing. I don't want the state messing with our speech, right? Like anyway, like just like if Facebook censors somebody, that's still not the state, right? And I'm not saying I support Facebook doing that, but I kind of do on some issues, and but I don't want the state. So I think more. I believe the classic trope that the best disinfectant is sunshine. That more speech is what we need to get to a more tolerant society, not less. So that's where I stand on that. With the canceling stuff. Look, I won't listen to Michael Jackson anymore. I mean, he raped, kids, and that's a decision I make, and I don't mind if his music publisher stops publishing his music. That to me, again, that's a decision that's not made by the state and all that stuff. I don't care. What I care about is, are you throwing in, as part of this, just an enormous amount of arrogant shaming? Shame has a social function. It's good to shame some people. Like you need shame in a society to operate. There should be things that we look at and say that's shameful. However, I feel like it could be done better than we currently do it now. The way that it's being done sometimes, I feel like is so unidirectional, intense, and frankly arrogant that you're not going to get the outcome you want. You're just going to piss somebody off.
You're going to get the opposite outcome.
They're going to go find. That's right. So I'm worried about that, and but I understand why people are fucking angry and rageful and doing all of that. But I don't know. Like in the last year, you're hearing in the mainstream at least that people are talking about this more. Like, there was this letter in Harper's Magazine about free speech, and yes, there was problems with it, but there is like the sort of the elites are starting to say publicly, this is a big problem if we're going to get to the kind of culture we want to have. And last thing I'll say is, it obviously doesn't help that we have an absolutely abominable person in the White House who shows kids. If you listen to even 10 minutes of a speech of his, that the right thing to do is to denigrate other people and to be hurtful and to go for the gut. Yeah, and it's just disgusting. So we got I never thought about role models at that level because I was pretty anti-authoritarian most of my life. I still am. So I was just I never thought about the importance of dignity coming from those kinds of public figures. But now I think about it a lot, and I see that shit is really, really, really important. It's very important that we have someone as showing that kind of stuff. And
that's my biggest concern with all of it. I try to stay absolutely out of politics altogether. When I graduated college and my first few years post-college, I was as liberal as you could fucking get, man. I was marching in the streets for all of the traditional liberal causes for those first 3 years out of college. I lived in Phoenix. Since then, as I've moved into adulthood and nothing makes sense to me, I've really made a conscious effort to get away to any sort of political attachment whatsoever, because my only guiding thought every morning when I wake up is, I have no idea what the fuck is going on, and it really doesn't seem like anyone knows the fuck is going on. There is no one at the wheel of this spaceship careening through infinity. And how could there be? And there shouldn't be. And actually really kind of making a concerted effort to find peace in that notion that hey, there is no boss, there is no God. We're all our own little individual gods in the heavenly kingdom we want to make here on earth. We all should have, equal say in this situation. And so, and when that manifests itself overtly politically, right, on, different perspectives on political issues, I'm certainly not a Trump supporter, but I truly, genuinely do not hold any animus or look down upon anyone who is. As long as you're not overtly espousing hurting other people, i.e. your Michael Jackson example, that would be an example to me where it's okay, yeah, let's cancel this motherfucker. He's raping children, obviously. Yeah. But if it's oh, you're super into guns, and I'm not going to take a position on any of these things I'm about to say. I'll stay, and I truly am kind of neutral on all of them. I really, like, who am I to fucking know anything about public policy or, like, imposing rules on other people? But, like, you know, say if you're pro-life or pro-choice, honestly, genuinely don't look at you any different on either one of those spectrums. Mm-hmm. If you're like, get rid of all the guns, or you're like, everyone should have an AR-15, honestly, I do not look at you any different. If you voted for Trump or you voted for Bernie, I truly do not look at you any different. But the thing where I am like, come on, man, this is not helping anybody, is like just being an asshole. Like, you can believe whatever the fuck you want, but don't be a dick about it. You don't have to be like mean. You don't have to be a mean person. Believe whatever the fuck you want. Believe that, you know, all humans originated from Adam and Eve, and anyone who has an abortion is like a grave sinner. Fine. While, like, you know, firing your shotgun in your backyard. That's totally fucking cool. Live your life. But don't be an asshole about it. Don't try to impose your views on people, and don't, like, denigrate other human beings. That's the big concern for me about all of this. Like, once again, I'm saying I wouldn't give a shit if Trump was president if it were just like whatever. I don't know. I don't follow this stuff. I don't know if he has like specific espoused policies and like a political platform or not, or if it's kind of just like a whole pro wrestling stick. I don't follow it closely enough to really be able to know. But let's just say Trump adopts like you know, the standard Republican template on the issues of the day, and that's just him. If our president is a Republican and he's espousing, you know, right-wing stances, okay, cool, whatever. If that's if that's how the election shook out, so be it. Cool, fine. Who cares? Well, obviously people care, but like, don't be an asshole about it. You don't have to be a dick. You're setting an example from the very top, and like you said, it starts with children. Like, children are looking up to this dude and be like, oh, in order to be like powerful and successful, you got to be a fucking asshole. It's like, ugh.
Yeah, and it's a Pandora's box. I mean, look, I do have a lot of anger, rage, and frankly animosity towards people that are subscribing to a political paradigm right now that, in my view, is very oppressive. But here's the thing. So I've got all of those feelings and thoughts, you know, and the thing is that then I got to strategically think about, how do I want to express myself and build relationships with people so that I can get to the world that I want. And maybe that is sometimes like you know, like a really fucking intense pushback, but a lot of times too, it could be that I don't want to act from that place. You know, I spend a lot of time in Republican towns and stuff like that, and have a lot of conversations with people. And, you know, sometimes I can have these conversations where we have some connection, and I can find a place to talk about my political views in a way that somebody hears it and it's not being shouted at them. And, you know, I think there's a role for that. I mean, there's probably a role for all of these different kinds of things. I just, you know, and there's just a lot of emotion in the air that's, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people hurting from racism and from poverty and from sexism. And Trump, you know, has 20 rape accusations against him, some of which pass every bar for, you know, legal validity. And, you know, and, you know, this is our, you know, so it's like this is the most
powerful human on the planet.
I want him canceled. I want the motherfucker canceled. But the problem is like you said, 45, 50% of people like him. So I still got to live with these people. So how
exactly?
You know, how are we going?
Yeah, you got to pick your battle together. Yeah.
Right. And like and think about it in the way of like, what is the outcome I want, and what's the best way to get there, right? Like, and yeah, and I guess people, you know, one other thing I wanted to say too, you're talking about like, I mean, you're talking about like figuring out for yourself like who you are, and you know, I mean, there's real tendencies right now to try and fall into herd mentalities, and
1,000%.
And there's a usefulness in it. I don't think it's always bad to have the pressure of a herd to try and get people to conform. I think there's actually a social function for that. But I think a person should also have to be understanding that if they're going to subscribe to a herd, does that really, like, is that really what they want to do? Does that resonate with what they actually think about the world? It's, I didn't start about a year ago. I realized, man, I have a lot of thoughts that I don't think I've actually independently thought through. I have a lot of thoughts that I think that I've heard things and I'm just sort of saying them. And so I think there is a task, for like really trying to evaluate, to try and use critical thinking and feeling things out and learning about other cultures and how other people think about things, and then being like, okay, I've got all of this, and how am I going to put this together in a way that feels like it resonates? Because I think there is something to this, like resonating with your body. Some people might say
your
with your inner self or your intuition. And look, all that can be off. I mean, your intuition could be off, but that's other work you can do, is to try and get it on. But it's just like that resonation. I mean, we're creatures, individual creatures. We're biological organisms, but we're also spiritual organisms. We're ecological organisms, and we got all this going on in us. And we are a node at which all of these influences come together. And I think our responsibility at that node is to make sense of it from that particular individual viewpoint, and to be able to have avenues to express that and to act from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if there's one lesson I've learned as I've kind of stumbled out of the throes of psychological despair here over the last few years, it's like, dude, quit thinking so much. And like,
yeah, you gotta shut that off sometimes.
Rely on how shit, like, quit trying to use your brain to guide you through life. And I know it sounds like super Pollyannish and woo-woo, but like, rely more on your heart, or for, a little bit more of a descriptive way to put that, like, rely more on how it feels. When you're confronted with a situation or a decision or whatever, how does that, like, does that make you feel good? Does that make you tense up? Like, just to offer an example of that, one thing I've done in quarantine, like that I'm almost certain will continue for the rest of my life, that has been a super positive result of quarantine, is like messaging on my phone, text message. I contacted you via Facebook Messenger, emails. There's all these different apps, WhatsApp. It's like, dude, those fucking messages. And I'm not some like mover and shaker in the business world who has a ton of contacts. I have a group of close friends, and I'm a friendly guy. And in quarantine, it's not like and during COVID, I haven't like met a whole bunch of random new friends or anything. But still, all day long, it's just like message. And every time message come in the past, it's like, oh, I pick up my phone and I'm diverting my attention. I'm diverting my energy from whatever I was doing down to this.
Yeah, it's very jumpy.
And then I'm back. I'm back to living life. And then a new message comes in, and I divert my attention. I'm back. Every time I do that, every time I divert my attention, it feels bad to me. It feels like like a little tinge of pain, like not physical pain, but something dark, something not good inside of me. And so the only thing I do now is I set aside, it's usually in the morning, I set aside like 30 minutes in the morning. And it's like, this is my checking messages time. And I'm responding to texts, I'm responding to emails, I'm responding to anything over social media. I don't check social media. I never anymore just like browse through social media. If I have a phone call, I'll return it. And that's my time to do that. And if a text message comes back or WhatsApp message comes back during that time, then I'll respond during that time, during that window, that 30 to 60 minute window. Otherwise, see you tomorrow. But But then inevitably I'll note, and I try to turn off all of my notifications on my phone, except I have an iPhone, except like the little red circle, like that pops up that says like 24 texts or whatever. I don't have sounds. I don't have them like popping up on my screen. But even still, when I go on my phone for whatever reason and I see like, oh, you checked your text message this morning, but now there's a number 8 there. I see that number 8, and I'm like, ugh! Like, go away! Like, it resonates within me like gross, like scary, like too much. It's like a vampire. Like that little 8 is a vampire of my fucking time and energy. And
it impairs thinking. I mean, it's turning us into cyborgs. And, when you were saying, too, about the, like, trusting your intuition and thinking, one other thing I want to say about that is the way that we think about reality or evaluate something. So if I'm going to evaluate, what do I believe about this? That whole structure of language and the way that I have verbs and adjectives together ends up shaping the conclusion I'm coming to. So I think that's another part of it too, is what are the forms of thinking that we're too reliant on? Like I believe we're too reliant on reason and rationality and logic, that we actually need other forms of thinking. I was listening to, my friend turned me on to a Lakota speaker and writer, Lakota Sioux, and named Tiokasin Ghost Horse. And he was talking about in Lakota language how, it's not like you have a pronoun, I, and then a verb, do, and then a noun, this. I don't know if this is a noun, but he would say the whole structure is different. And so that there's you're not actually relying on starting with the idea of I. And so anyways, when I heard that, I thought, God, there's so many other possible ways of experiencing the world than just what we think, because it's so inbred in us. So I think a part of the task is trying to learn and feel out different forms of thinking. I mean, look, people are running into this now with science is saying that reason and rationality, like climate change is this many parts per million and this is what we need. It doesn't work. It's it works in some ways, but it doesn't, so I think there is, people are starting to run into, and I found this out with mental health, to kind of get back to that, the whole idea of mental illness, which I was diagnosed and I'm a psychiatric survivor. I was in hospitals. I took over 20 kinds of psychiatric drugs. I've been through the whole mill, but the basis of it is that what people should be are reasonable, rational creatures. And, that's a new idea. That's actually not, it's not how people should be, but that's what, it's sort of the argument is that that's how people should be. And so we have all these constructs built on top of that. But, I don't know if that got far off track.
No, actually that is literally
I'm a loose thinker.
Transition. Yeah. No, that's a perfect transition. Because we haven't, I honestly thought in this conversation we'd be talking almost exclusively about mental health and psychiatry and all of that shit. So that's a perfect transition into it. It sounds, and you know much more about this than I do. But just real quick background for the listeners, I know I mentioned it briefly. Steve and I came to meeting because I experienced psychological struggles throughout my life. And then, it's been like a roller coaster ride. Sometimes there's good times, there's bad times, there's good times, there's bad times. And I was in a really bad time in the summer of 2015. And I believe my older sister went to high school with Steven, and she knew, I guess, probably through social media, thank God, there's the benefit of the internet, right? That you have extensive experience in this and of viewing it and treating it in alternative ways. And she suggested that I reach out to you, and I did. And that's how we came in contact. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, we both, once again, just intuitively, this is an intuition on my part. My intuition is that trying to I don't know, eliminate quote unquote mental illness with pills just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And I don't know, that seems really dangerous to me. And it always has, even from my earliest struggles with mental illness when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, that intuitively didn't make sense to me. I'm like, wait a second. So you're just going to, as a child, I was thinking this, wait, you're just going to flood my brain with all these chemicals and hope that you morph it into something new that fits society better? So wait, you're telling me my brain is a square peg and society's a round hole, and the only way to make this insertion happen smoothly is inundate it with lab produced chemicals? This doesn't seem like a great idea. Are we really going to do this? All right, let's do it. See what the fuck happens. And really, that's what it seems like psychology or psychiatry is. And I've said this on podcasts before. My experience with psychiatry is you come to a quote-unquote doctor. Really, they seem more like drug dealers than anything, right? Psychiatrists specifically don't spend much time working through your shit. It's kind of like hearing your problems, and it's like, oh, well, there's been some papers written on problems that kind of sound like yours, and about, I don't know, maybe more than 50% of people have experienced some relief by swallowing all of these blue pills. And so it's like it seems to me like they're just throwing darts at a dartboard. It's like, oh, you're experiencing this set of symptoms? Okay, there have been other people in history that have experienced a similar set of symptoms, so let's throw this dart at the problem. And it's like 6 months later, like, that didn't work? Okay, well, there's some new papers out that said that this prevented these people from killing themselves, so here's a new dart. Actually, let's throw both the darts at the same time. It's like, what are we doing here? This is my brain. Like, what? And so it seems, and then I became an elementary school teacher, and this is when I really started kind of getting scared with it and even getting a little disgusted with myself with it, because as an elementary school teacher, I would see these kids not be able to sit still, and they're running around the room, or they're clearly their personality or who they are as a being, right? These are children. It's the purest form of being we have. They haven't had that much time on this spinning globe to like alter who their like pure nature is. And obviously their pure nature is not going well with us asking them to sit still for 7 consecutive hours. But it's like, listen, man, you got to sit still for 7 consecutive hours. That's the game we're playing here on this globe. So here's some chemicals for you. These will help you sit still for 7 consecutive hours. And don't get me wrong, in a lot of those cases, it works, right? Like the Adderall, the Ritalin helps the little pure angelic child sit still for 7 or 8 hours, but you can't help but wonder, like, wait a second, did we just, like, totally mute and annihilate some sort of unique creature here to help him fit the paradigm that we're all just kind of marching along with? It's like, maybe we should alter who we are as human beings, as you're doing with celibacy, as you're doing, like, living out of a tent or living in nature. We'll get into your exact life experience here. Which I think I've made concerted efforts to do is, this whole traditional societal paradigm we're operating with, I don't feel like I really resonate with it. Instead of like chemically, I don't know, like castrating, it feels like my brain, my essence, so I can fit into the box. Maybe I'll just take a step outside the box altogether and look for an alternative path, an alternative way of existing, rather than, chemically, altering my entire mode of being in order to fit the paradigm. Very generally speaking, and I'll wrap it up here and I want you to take over, very generally speaking, to tie it back to kind of some of the topics we touched on earlier, I feel like I'm a hunter-gatherer. I feel like I was supposed to be born 15,000 years ago, and I'm supposed to have spent my life looking for berries and hunting wildebeest, and like you said, living in a small village, having sex with everyone, and not sure who my kids are. I feel like I'm a hunter-gatherer that's supposed to be living in the woods, yet I was born in 2020, where TikTok is like the coolest thing of the day. And I'm looking at all this, I'm like, what the fuck? How the fuck did I end up here? And wait, I'm supposed to play this game like all these other people? I have to play this game? This game doesn't make any sense. And so, but when you're a child and you don't know any better, you don't have any life perspective, you're like, okay, I guess my brain is just broken. I mean, that's what everyone's telling me. The reason my personality, or the reason I'm having these thoughts that none of this makes sense, is not because, I'm a unique being, or this is intuitively wrong. It's because my brain is inherently broken. And if, I take the pills to fix the brain, then everything will make sense, and then I can fit into the box and sit in a chair and be quiet like everybody else. I don't know. It seems like a crazy concept. I know it is a crazy concept.
Yeah, man. What do you think I should just go off of the cuff, or is there something specific that
what I would like you? Yeah, because I know you have. This is your entire deal. What I would like you to do, if you could, as best as possible, and take as much or as little time as you need. Could you kind of take us through, kind of just tell us your life story here? This is how I thought we were going to start the podcast. Kind of tell us your life story, and then obviously throughout that life story, like, you know, tell us more specifically about your mental health story, mental health experience, how your thoughts have evolved, and how you've become kind of a professional and expert in this world. So can you kind of just start at the beginning and walk us through your experience with psychology and psychiatry?
No, but I can try and give a very just watered down a couple things. I just want to say, if people are ever interested in any of the work I've done around this, I have this website, Stephen with a V Morgan Jr. as in junior.com, where I've written a lot about this and also done videos and stuff. So, and I can, and part of the process of writing stories from my life around this was that I actually wanted to capture very specifically exactly what I wanted to say. And when I completed some of those writings, I am weary of going back in time through a lot of my experiences because I never quite get it the way that I want to say it. So I won't. I'm not going to go into depth, but I'll just say like I said, I consider myself a pretty vulnerable person. I'm happy to do depth conversations, but around this particular thing, I'm careful with it because of all the intricacies and stuff. So the writing and the videos and stuff get much more into it. But look, when I grew up in the Southeast in Georgia. My family's from Mississippi and Georgia. Grew up in that kind of culture, and then I started to have, I don't know, at a pretty young age, I started to have problems with obsessions and stuff like that, and I also had problems with thinking about suicide, which was all very tied together because I just got tired. My mind was so active and crazy making, and some of that was from trauma, probably a lot of it, but people often think about like trauma is like the way I think about it, it's not like bad things happened to me and therefore I had a bad mind. I think bad things happened to me and therefore I became more sensitive to the world. So I opened up my ability to perceive, maybe because I was watching out more or maybe because I was looking for more depth in reality, but I became more sensitive and open, and that was very good for my artistic pursuits because I can hear like sounds that sometimes people probably aren't even noticing, those kinds of things. But it was also very, that turned me into, we don't really have, especially in the Southern culture, being a man, there's not a lot of room for like sensitivity and all that kind of stuff. So it was very difficult to exist like that. I had no outlets for talking about my mind. And because I didn't have the language. Long story short, broke down, suicide attempts, hospitals, got diagnosed with bipolar, OCD. A lot of it was, all of it was voluntary. I was going myself to try and get help because I felt like I was going to die. So I don't have the lived experience of being forced into psychiatry, which is a whole other way of interacting with psychiatry in the state, and thank God I don't. And but anyway, so I sought out the psychiatric drugs. I took I'd take lots of them at one time because I needed my experience to change, and at a certain point things got so bizarre in my mind. It's just like, I'll give you an example. Like I would get lost in tape loops in my head. This is going to sound really weird, but of Roy Jones Jr., the boxer, getting knocked out. So I would see this in my head, and I would have to replay it for sometimes hours, and it would always be there hovering. This is just one example of kind of what was going on in my mind, and I'd have to keep trying to play it in my head until I saw it perfectly, which of course you can never do. So things like that were really intense, and sometimes they spilt over into very kind of altered realities, and having fears about things that probably were not happening in consensus reality and stuff. And it was terrorizing. Look, there are a lot of things made a difference in my life with that kind of stuff. But the biggest thing was I tried therapy, and I kind of hit the jackpot with this guy named Jack, who, when I showed up to see him for the first time, he's like, "What brings you here?" I was like, "I've just been in the hospital. I'm self-injuring. I'm bipolar. I take all this stuff." I did that for like 45 minutes because I kind of learned, like you're saying as a kid, like I learned this story that's who I was. I have a mental illness, and I was applying for disability.
1,000%.
Really hard.
Yep.
So I'm repeating the story that I've received from the state, and I tell this guy all of that, and at the end of it, he looks at me and he says, I'm expecting him to be like, "Well, you got mother issues." Now, and hi, Mom. I'm not talking about the issues of you, but like I'm expecting him to give me some psychoanalysis. Instead, he said, "Stephen, I am a wild man too," and I was like, "What?" Like this guy just told me he's a wild man. Like, so he treated my experience as really valuable, and we did a lot of work with dreams, with exploring hallucinatory stuff, like. At least in the dream world, I was having some stuff like that I started meditating, and some of that was very visually and auditorily active. And so that relationship validated me, and I could tell him anything that was in my mind. So I told him things, I just told you the Roy Jones thing. Well, I had a lot of stuff in my mind that was very, very uncouth, meaning that you can't talk about it because I would be, people, right. So, but I could with him, and I really needed that. And so anyways, that all very much helped for me to get a grip. And I noticed that the more I interacted with my dream world, the more symbols came in my dreams. I had lots of dreams of big animals, sharks and bears, and of eels, and the animals would come and talk to me. And I developed this like really, really potent connection with nature during that time. And, even in the waking life, like my, animals, like I would see more animals. They come, there was just a lot going on there. And so that was the start of my journey. I ended up moving from the city to Vermont, where I lived on dirt roads in small towns. And that whole way of doing life where everyone shuts off their lights at 7 p.m. and I've got a road I can walk on and not hear another car. And, people help out their neighbors for the most part and that kind of thing. That also, I lived there for a long time and I'm still a resident of Vermont. And all of that during that period of my life helped me become a person that could stay in the world, that could do what I got to do to survive, and also keep some of the places I'd gone to mentally and emotionally as a part of me, not look at them as like this is a mental illness anymore, because that framework, it worked for a little while, but then it was like, that doesn't make sense because I'm trying to divide my head into sickness and health. And that's, I can't do all of that. All of it is me. And, and so by holding on to some of those experiences, and yes, the last thing I'll say is, so then the last 15 years, I've been working in peer support, like people with lived experience, psychiatric survivors working with others. I've done various forms of it. So that became my life, my work mission, I guess, was to try and work to create places and relationships where other people having extraordinary experiences could be validated and have a home, a place where their experiences could become meaningful. And sometimes experiences are not meaningful. Like I said, the Roy Jones Jr. thing, like, what the fuck is the meaning? I don't need to do all kinds of psychoanalytic work on what that means. I don't care. I hated that experience. And so there is this, there is stuff like that is meaningless. However, that same obsessive tape loop process that allowed me, that was doing that, became the same obsessive tape loop process that I now put into woodworking and leatherworking and trying to create something with it. I can get obsessed and learn something and, really challenge myself to try and make the best that I can. I got to say one last thing. Is it,
say all you want. It's great.
Is it, Alex, I think if our society is serious about reducing what they call mental illness, then what we need is political, economic, and social change. And we need, very importantly, to end rape. That if we end those things, we're going to see a whole lot less breakdown. We also need to just open the culture's mind to be able to be cool with people having extraordinary experiences and big emotions, and people need to be able to have those and still work in the ways that they can provide for themselves and stuff like that. We need to have cultures that are okay with that. Just simple things like time off, like being able to, like this whole 2 weeks off a year from work. I mean, people are going to fucking keep breaking down with that kind of thing. And then they go on disability. Our whole disability system is screwed up. So we need universal basic income so that everybody has a floor at which they can provide for themselves. You're going to see a lot breakdown. But the reason why I said rape is in my experience, so many psychiatric survivors experienced violence, intense violence in their families, or rape as a kid or as an adult, or multiple instances of it. And that's been shown over and over in the scientific literature that's highly, highly, highly correlated with what we call mental illness, but nobody likes to talk about it at the cultural, like in the mainstream, so they never do. But if, that is a huge, when people are raped, especially as children, or violated with intense violence or neglected intensely, that is very hard to handle, and that might lead to you being a much more sensitive, open person. It might lead to other things, but that carries into adulthood often, and it really hurts a lot of people. And I guess I got to say one last thing. There's still also room too. I want to say there's also people who make sense of their experiences through like a spiritual thing. People really do have connections with the universe, even if they're on a 7-day all-nighter binge and it looks like a manic episode. What they're experiencing is a reality, and that is something that's valuable. So we need to rescue some of that aspect too. Is that there's actually important things happening in that process that the culture can learn from. So how are we going to build places where people having out their experiences can have community, sanctuary, go through them, and the people around them learn something from it, right? And we especially need this right now with a lot of people being very divorced from Earth. And, a lot of people's out there experiences often involve connection with Earth, and that voice is trying to come through, and it's going to come through the sensitive people. And sometimes sensitive people are people that have had trauma. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's just sensitive people. And we need to be making room for that as well. Like, this is actually a really important natural process happening on the planet right now.
So I have literally been, do you mind if I ask you a couple follow-up questions? Because I've been jotting down notes as you have been talking. It's like so much is coming to my head all at once. That I literally just pulled out a pen and a piece of cardboard to start jotting down notes. So like, not to escape me. The first thing I want to say, as twisted as what I'm about to say sounds, I think it's important. I really like that you use the word rape. Honestly, the term molestation, or like use some other term that is like seems like a watered down version of what we're talking about here. It's we talk about child molestation or sexual abuse, that term as well. Like, I get it. I guess that's like a more palatable way to say what is happening when an adult forcibly has sex with a child, like violently penetrates a child. Like, the word is rape. And I think it's important that, like, we use that word or whatever word, like, encompasses what it is. Like, it's something horrible and cruel and dark and twisted, and its impacts extend far beyond just the violent act itself. Its impacts extend for a lifetime, and not only the victim's lifetime, that victim, you know, I'm sure in tons of scenarios goes on to perpetuate that violence, or, you know, goes on to suffer from mental illness, which can then perpetuate other negativity in other people's lives. So I think it's super important that we come to some uniform descriptor of that horrible act. And rape seems like the best one. I don't like this term child molestation. It seems to like sanitize it in some way that it's like, yeah, I mean, and a child being raped.
And let me just say, Alex,
go ahead.
Let me just say something, interrupt you really quick and just say that a lot of people that do experience that don't go on to perpetuate the violence. They actually experience more violence for a lot of reasons. I just want to make that correction because I think that's a really important thing for people to understand is that, and also, even though it can be something that somebody has, there can be a hangover or a ghost of it for life, you know, I don't want it to sound like people are damned because of that, because people change, you know, and so sometimes, I just but go ahead. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, it seems, I obviously I don't have the academic background that you do on the subject, but just in my personal experience with other people that have suffered from mental illness, it does seem to be, it comes up over and over and over again. I think I've been, in my adult life, you used the word vulnerable a minute ago about like your experiences, and you're willing to be vulnerable with your experiences, even, you know, the dark ones. And I feel like I've done the same. I've been very vulnerable with my psychological issues, and I think that I know that opens up conversation with people I do talk to it about their psychological experiences. And time again, I hear from people who have gone through very dark times in their lives that they were raped as a child. I've heard that so many times.
It's
honestly, to the best of my knowledge, I was never raped as a child, but because the people I've interacted with that have had similar psychological issues that I have, because it's so common for me to hear that they were, I honestly am like, I constantly am like digging through my brain, like, am I repressing something here? Is there something I don't remember about some soccer coach or something, you know? And I haven't come to anything. I don't know where exactly my issues stem from, but anyway, yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that. So if you would point to like, if there's some sort of like silver bullet to eliminate it, obviously not completely eliminate complete mental illness from our society, but in your experience and your expertise, like sexual assault is like the number one if there's one thing that we could change with a magic pill, you know, that would be it.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, but again, it's so hard to unthread them all, because I would also want to eliminate economic poverty. I'd want to eliminate violence. I mean, violence is a huge contributor. But if I had to pick one thing, I mean, rape can be so devastating and has such devastating impacts that I would start there. And I mean, listen, we can make a lot of ground on this culturally. We need psychiatry to start saying aloud, wow, rape plays a big part of a lot of people's lives who I see. Not everyone, but a lot. And we need to be running public ad campaigns. You see these, you know, the ad council, the federally funded ad campaigns will run some good ads, like about be a friend to someone there with mental health challenges. Good. I like that stuff. We need to be running much more direct things about rape and saying it out loud and saying this is for women far more than men, although it's obviously a part of men's lives as well. This is happening at rates that people do not comprehend, and it's extraordinary and it's terrifying. And almost all of my women friends have been raped, and it's not just because I'm friends with psychiatric survivors. It's just because it's that prevalent. And so that's a big door that we have to open in terms of there's a lot of researchers that spent their careers, you know, studying this and putting it out there, but now it's got to get into the mainstream. But nobody wants to talk about it at that level. I mean, we're not going to hear Biden, you know, stand up there, but that's what we need. And then obviously women being raped by men is a problem with men, not with women. And so that leads in all kinds of other directions about men need to be raised differently. We need whole different conceptions of what that means so that men do not rape, you know. And anyway, so that's where I would put a lot of attention on that.
Yeah. Because you just mentioned very generally, you were like, we need, you know, economic reform or something. We need social shifts or something. And you just said rape. And I was like, it resonates. It really does. And I actually brought this up on a podcast recently, talking about just the Catholic Church it wasn't like I was having a podcast about the Catholic Church, but it just came up. And like, even when we talk about the Catholic, there's the largest, most influential religion in the world clearly has a huge fucking issue with raping children. And when we discuss, once again, it's like, I guess people are just uncomfortable with the notion and would rather just not think about it. And so instead of just being like, whoa, what the fuck? We need to eliminate, I don't want to get into necessarily controversial religious topics, but it's like, dude, if there were any other organization, like if it were like Amazon or, I don't know, Apple or the Boy Scouts, they probably have their own issues, whatever. If there's any other global organization where this was so prominent, like we'd all be, it seems like we should be marching in the streets for its eradication.
Exactly.
I mean, not that people,
yeah, exactly.
Not that,
and the people, let me just note one thing too. It's also that they've shown that sometimes, when they do these studies, that sometimes close to 80% of incarcerated women in jail have been sexually assaulted or raped. And so just think about that. I mean, that's extraordinary. So right. So even for the criminal justice system advocacy, that needs to be a part of the dialogue too. And like I said, there has to be a whole focus on why are men doing this and how can we address that. And that, again, it ties into everything as well. But yes, the Catholic Church and these big institutions with rape built into them. And of course, the Catholic Church is a patriarchal.
It's like a part of the deal, and we all just accept it. It's like, oh yeah, that happens with the Catholic or with the priests. It's not all of them, so we'll keep going to Sunday service. Like, what? What's going on?
I'm not sure why a lot of more people didn't walk away from their
and the way it's discussed though, it's always discussed using the term like the Catholic sex abuse scandal, child sex abuse scandal, like it's like some like religious figure cheated on his wife or something. It's like, no. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of men in positions of religious power who are viewed as gods who are fucking kids in the ass. Like, this is not some sort of like. Why are we speaking about this so like euphemistically and like with like kid gloves on? Like, let's address this problem head on. Anyway,
go ahead. Okay, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, we also need to look at power relations there. That why do we have a structure in society where that speaks to spirituality, where you have people that are in charge and followers? So this is also with New Age circles, but, why do we have this? That's not actually how a lot of other cultures have done spirituality. And if they have done it where you have leaders, they're not the kinds of leaders that they don't have the kind of power. And so we need to structure, that all has to structurally change. I mean, I like that Pope Francis, for instance, says some relatively progressive things. But I'm like, give me a fucking break. Are we really like happy that he's come around on saying that gay people should be able to do civil unions? He still doesn't believe women should be in charge. Yeah, I mean, why does he have this power? Take that shit away. Like, this is not like.
Why is he dressed like a fucking wizard? Why does his organization accumulate mass like real estate across the planet in gold and billions of dollars, and then there's one guy at the top of all of it? Like, what is going on?
Well, and it's just completely so. And I know I was raised very religious. I thought about entering the priesthood, so I want to acknowledge these are very deep beliefs to people. But Jesus would throw up at the idea of a pope. This is just read Jesus's words. It was, this was about getting to a society where you didn't have the. I mean, Jesus was wrong about some things with power structures in society, but what I'm saying is it's actually not following the words of Jesus to have these kinds of power relations that lead to people being able to damage other people. If you take away the power, the ability for them to be able to damage other people, they can't do it. So, so anyway, so that's a big deal.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's like a bunch of bad eggs. It seems like the institution, the structure of the institution itself promotes this sort of thing. I don't think it's like, oh, it's just a coincidence I think the way the whole institution is organized promotes people. You've got a bunch of people who are cool with not having sex, apparently, for the rest of their lives. Like, why is, what's the antecedent there? And then there's this whole power dynamic where, like, you're the boss of this whole flock of people. Essentially, do whatever you want. You're the one who has the connection with God. So, you're the man in this situation. And it just lends to some pretty horrific shit, it seems like.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to. You mentioned this term, and I'm assuming we've discussed this before. But honestly, when you mentioned it just now, it drew a blankness for me in terms of what it is: psychiatric violence or psychiatric survivor. Psychiatric survivor.
That's right.
What does that mean exactly?
Okay. Good. That's a great question. Well, people who have interacted with mental health systems try and like come to words that try and express their experience. So some people, like, I used to say I have a mental illness, so my word was I'm mentally ill, right? And then there's a whole movement of people that call themselves consumers, like I consume mental health services. So there's that, and I don't like consumer because I just find that very capitalistic, and I don't like, and I don't consume mental health services, at least in the way that I used to. So I don't like that term, but that's kind of popular in the mental health system. Like, this person is a consumer. Sometimes people will say clients, but so basically it's how does a person want to express their experience of having interfaced with the mental health.
Sorry to interrupt, Stephen. The consumers, is that another word for patient?
Yeah, patient's another word, yes. And people say that the word consumer is more empowering. I don't think so. I mean, so people come to their own terms, and I have a lot of thoughts about all of them. But for me, psychiatric survivor, while I don't feel like that fully expresses my experience, in part because, like I said, a lot of, I didn't just survive psychiatry. It's much more nuanced and complicated, but that is a term that came out of a lot of activism of people who felt very harmed by psychiatric systems, especially people who have been forced into mental health. I mean, that's a very traumatizing experience. And, so that term carries the weight of a movement of activists who are trying to change the mental health system. So it's for me, the one that feels most resonant because I really want to change the entire mental health system, not to provide better treatment. I mean, I'm at the edge where I want to blow it up and start over with much more local ways of understanding crises and dealing with them. So, like you said before about psychiatric drugs, I mean, we're in a very, very dangerous world with this kind of stuff, and of course, some people find psychiatric drugs helpful. I find synthetic drugs helpful for my autoimmune disease. I take them every day. I don't like taking them. They give me all kinds of adverse effects. I need them. However, my autoimmune disease would not exist if we weren't doing industrial capitalism, destroying the environment, and creating the conditions under which people develop autoimmune disorders. Just like if somebody decides, if they're having crazy experiences and they take psychiatric drugs, that might be very helpful. I have friends that find that very helpful. I totally support that. But why is it that we have a society in the first place that creates it so that people have to do this in order to survive reality or consensus reality? And so anyway, so I think, so all that's very complicated, but I just want to say to you, when you investigate this whole idea of taking synthetic drugs, like all the psychiatric medications, and I believe it's 1 in 5 Americans is now taking them. So this is like, and they've been exported all over the world. This is like right. It rests on an idea that the body is a machine, and in particular that the brain is a machine, and these are going to fix machine parts. It comes from the scientific revolution and from the Western Enlightenment back in the late 1600s and 1700s, particularly with a mathematician and philosopher named René Descartes. He said that the body is like a clock like a physical clock. It's a machine that's been wound up. And so that whole approach to looking at the body and nature was that we're going to start seeing everything as machine-like rather than soul-like, or rather than imbued or instilled with a kind of animating energy. We're going to see it as a machine. That led to the scientific revolution. And so now everyone thinks that your mind comes from your brain, even though no one can prove that. They think your mind comes from your brain, and your brain is operating under the laws of physics. So it's just a machine that's wound up. And so therefore we're going to tinker with the parts. Now, an alternative way of looking at the human body and the brain that I think would produce much, much better results is to look at it as a conscious, living system, so that the cells in your brain, the neurons, they are alive. No one disputes that. Those are living beings. And when serotonin is getting passed around, that is a cell communicating with another cell. They use serotonin and dopamine as language, as words. So if we approach all of your organs in your body as a living being and composed of lots of other living beings, like your brain is a self-organized living being composed of smaller cells, and we start treating it like that, then we'll realize that if we throw in a wrench into that living system, we might get an effect that's going to help, but we are inevitably going to get living beings, like your neurons, are going to start reacting to it. And they want to do their own thing. Just like if you lock up a person, that pisses them off. If you lock up a cell, that pisses them off. And so you're creating the potential for a lot of adverse experiences from it, which a lot of people experience from taking psychiatric drugs.
And so essentially, once you kind of came to that revelation, this kind of post-psychiatry revelation, you've dedicated that's kind of been the primary focus for your professional existence over the last, what did you say, 15 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And
yeah,
so
15 years,
I know I'm about to offer a rudimentary explanation here of like this organization that you've worked in. It's kind of, the way I look at it, it's kind of like AA for psychiatry.
There's a lot of, that's for people to understand. I mean, that's a helpful start for thinking about it, is it's people coming
I know
together
that's very
with
rudimentary
experiences. Yeah, and one of the big differences is AA is based on monologue. Like you go there, you tell your story, and nobody comments on it. And peer support in the psychiatric survivor world is based on dialogue, that we're going to build a relationship together. We're going to talk back and forth and try and generate new ideas about what's going on and ways of being together that feel like they lead to a better life. So it's basically psychiatric. It's peer. People call them peers, although that's a problematic term. But peers working with peers, but people with lived experience working with others. And this happens in the mental health system. I've worked in hospitals. I've worked in big mental health agencies. It also happens outside of that system, where there's these peer support places that I've worked at and helped develop that are run by people with lived experiences. So I was the director of a house where people, psychiatric survivors, and also folks experiencing homelessness, and basically anybody actually from the community could come, and we did our own thing. We didn't have psychiatry and nurses and all that kind of stuff. We were focused on art and food and relationship and being neighbors and all that kind of stuff. So there's that world too, which is basically alternative to the mental health system as it currently exists.
Is there any situation or circumstance or experience or individual you've met where that lends support to the traditional notion of psychiatry, that the brain is an organism that breaks, either it breaks through time or it's born broken, and that pills are the tool to fix the broken brain? Is there any circumstance in which you support that notion? Are there like individual experiences where you see that is a sustainable approach? You know, what I can think of just off the bat is like maybe someone's went through a recent divorce or a really hard breakup or lost their job. There's some sort of acute depressive occurrence that happened, and maybe taking antidepressant for a limited amount of time would help pull them out of that dark time. Perhaps that's not the best way to do it. Maybe you should figure out an alternative way, but perhaps that's the most efficient and directed way to do it to alleviate short-term depression. That just offering that as an example. Is there any circumstance in which you kind of do see psychiatry pills, for lack of a better term, as the proper approach?
Well, I wouldn't frame it as proper or that people need the pills. What I would say is, yes, absolutely, that I see and know of a lot of circumstances where people taking the pills, it makes their life better for the society we have, for the reality that they have. So I totally support that. I've never, ever pushed a view that people should not take psychiatric drugs. I feel like these are very big decisions, and that we should just be framing it very simply this isn't fixing a chemical imbalance. This is changing your biological organism in a way that you might feel better, right? So it's not fixing anything, it's changing it. And the reason why I don't think it's fixing a broken brain is that we don't have the evidence of that. All of the people that talk about we have the evidence, you go and you read their research, it ain't there. They found very, very small things that may correlate in the brain, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I did want to say, though, it's funny with obsessions and compulsions with what gets labeled OCD. That's one of the few disorders in the big Bible of psychiatry that actually might have some biological roots to it. And this is very complicated, but it might have to do with strep throat virus and the antibiotics that people take. So they found that a lot of people that developed that had strep throat, and they're saying it's probably the virus itself is changing you. But I think it could also be the antibiotics, which are very dangerous, although they have their place, might be changing someone. So there is a little bit there. And also with PTSD, post-traumatic stress, yes, stress changes your organism. That's because your brain isn't a machine. It's a responsive living system. So when you go through something let's just take the example of a war zone, yes, you're biologically going to change, and we can see some of those changes, right? You can see that someone's amygdala in their brain is impacted by the stress they experience. That doesn't mean that was a brain. Actually, it definitely doesn't mean that that's a brain disease. That means that your living brain system has responded in a way where it or they, if we're going to use a pronoun for it, they, the brain, is doing the best it can with what it experienced and is trying to get through now. So, yeah. I love biology. I love biology and chemistry. I'm not totally against the idea that biology plays a vital role in all of this. I just think we've had this problem of biology being seen as a machine, where it's not. It's a bunch of living creatures. So that shifts everything, right? Then all the creatures in your body make their own decisions. And I'm not being woo-woo here. I mean, this is what their science shows. It's, this is, so, and cells in your body make their own decisions. They're not just being run by your genes. We can take two cells, they put them in the exact same environment, right? So two exact cells with the same genetic makeup, put them in the exact same circumstances, and they act differently. So it's not their genes making them do what they do. They operate, they take in information just like we do, and they make their own decisions. Now, there's a limit to what they can do. Obviously, your heart cell isn't going to build your brain, but there is decision-making happening. And so anything that you experience in the world that comes through your senses, that comes through your eyes, your nose, your mouth, that comes through your body is being translated by your cells, and your cells are making decisions thereafter about what to do with it.
Damn. All right, sorry, I'm jotting down more notes as you talk. the strep throat thing, that's what happened to me, dude. Forget the whole sexual abuse notion or anything. In fifth grade, first semester of fifth grade, I got horrible strep throat, and my tonsils got so infected that they actually started abscessing from my throat. They were so full of infection, they started literally ripping off the side of the throat. So by the time they went in to take them out, they had basically halfway removed themselves already. But in the treatment of that prior, I was being shot up left and right. I can remember these fat ass needles that my pediatrician would stick in both of my butt cheeks. Like, and they were the most painful needles ever, these giant needles. I remember seeing it being like, you're going to stick that in my ass? And I went in for multiple treatments of that. And then, lo and behold, like, by the end of 5th grade, I can't stop washing my hands. Every time I leave the house, I have to check all of the locks 60 times.
Yeah, and look, I won't go too far into this, but just a comment on that is that, you know, so you're obsessively washing your hands, right? And why would somebody want to obsessively stay clean? Well, look, our bodies are composed of cells, but there's far more bacteria. And these are living creatures that are floating around in your body. And we've shown that some bacteria can change your cellular makeup so that you start doing things like that. So can fungus, and we all have fungus in our body too, can change it. And the reason why a bacteria might want you to be washing your hands is so that you're not bringing in another bacterial colony.
Wow.
To compete it.
Holy shit.
So I think it makes a lot of sense to think about that our consciousness is primarily run by bacteria. Bacteria were the first organisms on the planet. They were the first living beings, and over 4 billion years, they've built every single form of life, including a redwood tree, a dinosaur, and people, and including fungus and everything. And they keep getting more and more complex. And you know, they run the show. I mean, there's bacteria a mile high in the sky. There's bacteria 2 miles into the Earth's crust. We're finding living organisms. They might even be doing things like creating fissures that lead to earthquakes. There might be an intentionality behind plate tectonics. I mean, they're everywhere. So anyway, so the bacterial beings. And so when we think about different kinds of consciousness experiences, especially ones that get labeled mental illness, we also want to be holding room for how might that relate to bacteria. It's not that I'm not saying that it's like all difficult experiences should be seen through that lens. I'm just saying, like, so there's a big interface. So when we were talking about rape before, well, if you're raped, then your hormone system, which is in part controlled by bacteria and cells, often gets or starts acting. It's not even abnormally. It just acts different because they want to stay safe. So you might get more adrenaline and cortisol and these kinds of hormones. Okay, if that starts happening in your body, that you start having that different thing, your body is going to devote less energy to, say, digestion. Digestion, if you're not, because it's focused on this hormonal stuff. If your body is not digesting properly, now you get bacterial imbalances. And so now you've created an imbalance, and boom, you might have an experience of consciousness down there that's happened because of that imbalance. However, it's still proper to say the problem was the rape, right? It's not that it was the bacteria. Right. The bacteria are just responding. So anyway, I just wanted to note that, the way they all tie in.
Dude, that's fucking fascinating. Holy shit.
I don't know if any of it's true, Alex. These are just things I've been thinking about the last couple of years. I tried to write a paper about it last year, but it ended up being way too wordy. So I might take another stab at it. But
yeah, you should. Yeah, you should take another stab at it. You should take another stab. I understand what you're saying. I understand that notion where it's like, you're trying to put together like a succinct body of knowledge to like help people out or inform people, but there's so much you get to. It's like, as you keep trying to express it, it just kind of keeps piling on top of yourself, and you get kind of. I understand what you're saying. Get kind of overwhelmed with it, but I think you should take another stab at it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think over time, with ideas, my experience has been that they clarify and they simplify over time. So, like, you can say something after you've been with it for a few years in kind of a Zen way where you couldn't in the beginning.
Right. Yeah. Are there? Okay. You mentioned OCD as one that maybe does have like a biological antecedent. And when I hear that, I'm just going to say
for some people,
my thoughts.
It's still, it would still be the evidence shows it'd still be a minority of people. I just want to note that, but so yeah.
Okay. And then you also mentioned earlier the psychiatric Bible, and I'm assuming you're referring to the DSM, correct?
Yeah.
Do you think
yes,
this whole notion of mental illness, right? Like, it's, once again, the traditional notion is like, oh, people get mentally sick just like they develop hepatitis or diabetes or cancer of some form, just like it's a physical illness. Do you believe, and I think from our understanding of what mental illness is, it's like, oh, you could develop schizophrenia, or maybe you're born with it, or you could develop bipolar, or maybe you're born with it, or you could develop multiple personality, or maybe you're born with it, or OCD. Do you believe it all? I don't know, believe is the right word. Talk to me about this whole concept of specific illnesses. Do you believe in this concept of like bipolar, like this person is bipolar, this person is schizophrenic, this person is obsessive compulsive, this person is whatever? Do you believe in that concept, like of these actual illnesses that like infect the brain? Or what it seems like more to me, I'll express my personal experience and then let you take over because you actually know what the fuck you're talking about, is it seems to me that it's like, no, like people are born into life, and the world we live in is a crazy world, be it from, environmental pollutants to Wi-Fi in the air to, being having a traumatic event as a child, and things kind of go wrong, quote unquote, for whatever reason. And they tend to go wrong generally in the same kind of ways. And so we've grouped these people, or we've grouped these symptoms that come in conflict with modern society into these kind of like umbrella categories of bipolar, schizophrenic, just like you would say, like, that person's born in that patch of dirt, so they're Mexican. That person's born in that patch of dirt, so they're American. That patch of dirt, so they're Chinese. When it's like, really, there's a ton of individuality amongst all of those people. How do you view this concept of like specific diagnoses? Is that real?
Well, it's real in terms of that people say it, and my one of my mentors, Sherry Mead, talk about people talk themselves into reality, and so
right.
in a way, it's real in that sense. It's not real in the sense that depression is like diabetes. Whereas we've very clearly found something going on with diabetes, like in your blood sugar, and we haven't found anything biologically and with depression. But even if we do, it's still a different thing, because we have to ask, why would someone's system, their living organism, react or respond in such a way that they start having these incredibly difficult and painful experiences? I mean, I start with the presumption that, like you were talking about hunter-gatherers, that it's not natural for us to have tons of anxiety and social anxiety. And I mean, we should have some, but it's not natural to have OCD. It's not natural to have, all that kind of stuff. And so these are things happening that are in a context, in a social context. Like, so somebody getting depressed, you have to ask, what are the social conditions under which that happens? But you also have to ask, what are the ecological conditions? I mean, in a city, and it's loud, and you're drinking water with chlorine, and, like you're interacting with 1 million people a day. It's all that stuff, like is a big problem. So look, here's how I'd frame it. Do I believe that there's any validity to it? I think it, to me, it's more or less, what is the most useful way that we could understand these experiences? And I don't think the mental illness model is producing a better world. I think, and there's a lot of evidence that the more the psychiatry has done, you've got a brain illness, the worse everything's gotten. And
right.
And they've studied this in multiple ways. So I think it's kind of, it's valid in one way of talking. I mean, you can kind of make something fit into it. Like, you could say depression is a chemical imbalance, although they haven't found the chemical imbalance. Let's say they do. Again, that doesn't say why are the chemicals imbalanced. Like what are the conditions under which an imbalance of chemicals would happen? So I just think we need like a way better way of thinking about all these experiences. That said, there are peculiar sets of experiences, like what we call mania, that are, I feel like, different than experiences like anxiety. And that's a whole other thing. I won't go into it. I did make a video called Psychosis and Ecology. It's on my website, arguing that, like, what we call psychosis or even mania, that there is an ecological, there's a natural function for that to our species, that our and that other species experience it too. So I do think those particular experiences, not always, but sometimes can be treated as having being part of a different universe than all the other ones that are more common, like depression. I don't think there's a natural function. I mean, natural and unnatural is a very complicated term. But I just think, to me, talking about depression, anxiety, all this stuff should always be held with, like, just, these are difficult, painful, this is pain that somebody has experienced because what's happened or what is happening in their life. And, so we want to help a person wants to be helped with their own pain, but we also have to change all the conditions so that there's a lot less pain. I mean, they show that in other countries where there's stronger communities and there's not as much Western capitalism, the people get better a lot quicker when they have breakdowns, and that they don't have as many breakdowns. So we know that there's something going on there. So anyways, I think we just need new frameworks. I'm not sure how to talk about it, honestly. Even though I've been talking about it for 15 years, I feel myself constantly changing the words I'll use. Like, I talk a lot about extraordinary experiences right now. Like that. I like that word, extraordinary. But it's, I'm sure that's recent. That's only in the last year that I would talk like that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think
we need a language that normalizes these experiences. The problem with mental illness as a language is, like, you're now that person.
Right.
You're that, and so that's and listen, when you're treated like that person, that's going to make you crazier. So it has an adverse impact for a lot of people. There are people who say, I love thinking about myself as having a brain imbalance. My life gets better because I think of it that way. I have a mental illness. That's who I am. That works. I get that. I just think that that's not enough people to get benefit from that for us to keep it. I think there's something else, some other framework that could make better sense of it that would lead to more people having better lives.
Right. Yeah, I've always, since I had strep throat in 5th grade, I've looked at myself as a broken, mentally ill person. And even after conversation, meeting you 5 years ago, really meeting you 5 years ago was a huge help in terms of me kind of reframing that perspective. But I'm not going to lie, I still, for the past 5 years, have viewed myself as, like, there's something wrong with me. There's something abnormal for me. And it wasn't until recently, actually, when I had a psychedelic experience, when I took some mushrooms and went to the woods, had a psilocybin experience, that it dawned on me this notion. Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask you that next. I was actually going to be my next question for you. Just about to go on this little rant real quick, or monologue. I had this notion. It's like the mushrooms are telling me, like, bro, chill out. Like, you are not this quote unquote mental illness. And yes, those things happened in your past, but that doesn't define you. And I'm sure we'll hear about your experiences soon, but, like, literally when I take mushrooms, that's literally how it feels. It's not like a voice in my head, but it's literally like all of a sudden this knowledge from the universe is being all of a sudden downloaded into my consciousness out of nowhere. And I'm like, whoa, where's this coming from? I didn't plug my USB port into, like, a mainframe. That's what it feels like. And the message that I was getting downloaded into my consciousness is like, bro, you need to let go of this notion of yourself as this broken person mentally, someone that's less than, or whose potential is inherently limited because you have experienced psychological issues in the past. Like, you're Alex. And Alex is a constantly evolving being, just like all people are constantly evolving beings. So the Alex who you are tomorrow isn't even Alex you are in this very moment. And the Alex you are in this very moment certainly isn't the Alex you were in 7th grade when you wanted to kill yourself, or when you were 25 and wanted to kill yourself or whatever, you are much more than that. You are a constantly evolving organism who is a new person essentially every moment. And that to me was profound, because even after speaking to you, and even after experiencing now kind of like a year and a half, 2 years of relative psychological stability, I still view myself as like this like ticking time bomb, waiting for the next implosion or whatever. And maybe I will, maybe I won't, but I still am struggling to detach myself from this identity of being a psychiatric survivor, now that I have that new term.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a lot of us are, man. A lot of us really struggle with all of that. I mean, look, the reality is that I went into an autoimmune flare this year that was, I was hospitalized. I couldn't walk. I mean, like,
wow.
Because of literal, not just inflammation, but the pain. And like, I don't want to talk about it much, or I don't have words for it yet. I mean, it's still a big part of my process right now, but yeah, I got, I was getting better, and then I had a big setback, and, I hit the suicide wall again. And that was really scary. I mean, I spent a month in a place but I have to say it was scary, but I know this shit now, just like you probably know.
Right.
Like, so what I'm saying is, like, going through it now as a 40-year-old man, having gone through it again, I was able to have a different relationship to it. And I knew that the most important thing was not to say, go away, because that makes shit for me worse. So I had to really, I had to reach out for support in ways that I trusted, and I needed to understand it and play with it, actually. And it was really hard. But in that, so sometimes, so I don't like the idea of, like, recovery. When people talk about recovery from mental illness and stuff like that, which is some popular terms, I don't really like that word, because I'm not sure that really gets at the nuance that, I think people just learn to have different ways of relating with experiences. Sometimes the experiences change, and sometimes they don't. But, like, what is the relationship that I have with suicide, for instance? And when I have that experience come up, what can I do in the world to try and to stay afloat, that kind of thing? Yeah.
Okay. I have a last couple questions here, and we've already just touched them on my piece of cardboard that I've just been jotting down notes on, because who actually uses a pen and paper anymore these days? I can't remember the last time I wrote something down on a piece of paper. Okay, so I'm going to generalize here, and then I want you to correct me if I'm off base, or if there's more nuance to what I'm saying. Or maybe I'm asking a question. Do you espouse then, and this is kind of the direction I'm kind of leading, as an antidote to quote-unquote mental illness, do you kind of promote a return, kind of a shedding of all the garbage as I see it? It's like almost like a life minimalism, a shedding of the social constructs, a shedding of the perpetual professional pursuit, the perpetual romantic pursuit, much more of literally a return to nature, a more simplistic, rustic way of living. Do you, and I don't know, maybe you can only speak for yourself personally, perhaps not, perhaps you have, a broader body of evidence from other people who have done the same. Is that how you kind of view your, an effective treatment, for lack of a better term? Like, instead of pills, go for a hike type of thing. I know that's a very rudimentary way to describe it, but it's like essentially a return to nature, kind of your personal approach, an approach that you would suggest for others?
Well, I won't make suggestions for other people. I've learned that, God, when I found things helpful, like sometimes I've done videos. I did that with my autoimmune disease, and people sometimes I want to try that. But I've always found that, there's this tendency, if I found something helpful, to try and sort of feel like everybody needs to do this, and I'm sort of eating my foot with that. And So I don't know, but I will say, look, personally, yes, my connection with nature, walking, now working on communication with plants, spending lots of time near water, showing gratefulness and curiosity towards the natural world and just noticing the natural world everywhere. And I've designed my entire life to maximize that. And that's one of the reasons why I decided on celibacy, was that I didn't want to be taken out of that in any way. And so for me, yes, it's the most important part of my life being all right. And that said, and I won't go down the bunny trail because it's just way too big of a topic, but I am, like, in terms of my ideology, the way I think about the world, the way I think about society, I am mostly anti-civilization. Now, the reason why, that's a very intense thing to say. So it requires a lot more nuance. It requires a lot more nuance. But anyways, I said mostly because nobody knows the future. But I do believe right now that the project of civilization, of kind of large scale farming, and then organizing human beings into cities, is an ecological catastrophe that is going to run its course, and that we actually don't have a solution. It's like if there's a river that has 100 gallons of water and your city needs 200 gallons of water, it ain't going to work out. And that's kind of what's happening right now. And so in that regard, so I think the project of civilization, which we've been doing in some form or another all across the globe for 10,000 years, which has had a lot of collapses of civilizations, there's very few that you could say have sustained, and for various reasons, including colonization, but also because of pandemics and because of food shortages. But a lot of it has been because a lot of civilizations have overshot the ecology, meaning they've ruined the soil, they've cut down too many trees, all that kind of stuff. So this model hasn't really worked very well for a lot, and it's a new model that we've only been doing for 10,000 out of several 100,000 years. I don't think it's sustainable. And in that regard, yes, I believe that we need cultural, social, and political change that starts with understanding ecology, nature, wildness, understanding the planet as a living organism, understanding the relations. And a lot of this, I believe, should be indigenous-led. A lot of indigenous cultures have the covenants with other species, like the covenants with the buffalo, and the understanding of plants, and the understanding of, what's called the honorable harvest, that you don't take more than half of a bush or of an ecosystem because you leave some for the animals, and just a completely different way of thinking about human beings' place on the planet. I'm in favor of more transition towards systems that honor ecological processes. And I don't think that civilization can. And I made a video called The Problem of Cities. I talked for an hour about why. But, in a nutshell, I just don't think we can have it both ways. We're either going to have Phoenix with all of the Colorado, not all of it, but a lot of the Colorado River being dammed and the water being shot over there, which depletes the ecosystem, which depletes the water cycle, which screws up the carbon cycle, which screws up the way that other systems get their rain. All this kind of stuff. We either have that, or we can have a hospitable planet. And I'm in favor of the hospitable planet. It would mean the most radical shift of societies and of dominant societies in history. So I think that would, yes, and I think that would produce, if it was done well, which I'm not sure that shift could happen well, but let's say it was, yes, we'd have way better mental health. People would be way happier.
Yeah.
I'd just be like, way happier. And, look at animals. Look at how wild animals in their niches live. They're not miserable fucking slobbing around and cutting themselves, right? Human beings do that. And, they did these experiments on chimpanzees. They put them in cages. After a week in a cage by themselves, this chimpanzee starts cutting themselves. These are this is what happens when we've built cages all around around us. And so I don't think our natural disposition is towards misery. I think a life that's ecologically sound can be harder in some ways. Like you really face ecological limits. Like you hit a drought and people really are going to die. I mean, people die right now from drought. But I mean, like that's like technology has solved some of this, but it's always temporary fixes. And they always have what's called a progress trap. This guy, Ronald Wright, talked about you make progress in one area, like we hit a drought. So therefore, we're going to dam the Colorado River and take from it.
Right.
Great. We solved the problem for now, but we can't make water. I mean, this has a limit. You can't keep doing that. And we have 84,000 dams in the United States diverting water. We've screwed it all up. So anyway, so yes, so there's some difficulty in it, but I think people's minds would be a lot better in a world where we were in ecological reciprocity.
I love that. Speaking of people's minds being a lot better, I had a question. Hold on, let me pick my brain real quick because I feel like I had one more follow-up question about the ecology of things. Maybe it'll come back to me. Okay. So, people's minds being better and nature being kind of this anecdote. What is your experience with plant medicines as a potential effective treatment of quote-unquote mental illness? And I know I keep using this mental illness term, but the more and more I talk to you, the more and more it seems like a ridiculous term to use. But just for the sake of the conversation. So, what is your experience with plant medicines? Is there medicine that exists not created by GlaxoSmithKline? Are there medicines for the mind out there in nature that do exist?
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, I use I have a relationship with kratom, which is a plant, and I've been using it for 5 or 6 years, and it's vastly improved my life. And I also experiment with psychedelic medicines from plants or from fungi that give me altered states that make my pained body a lot more habitable. Like I can live in it, my body a lot better, but they also expand my mind. And so those medicines, and look, I mean, 5 years ago, if I was saying this, everyone would freak out, but now the mainstream is accepting that psychedelic medicine is having huge impacts in improving people's lives. There's always studies about it. I've done some stuff on my website. There's some stuff on that. But so I mean, that's all becoming mainstream. But I did a lot of psychedelics when I was younger, when it was still taboo, and that stuff vastly improved my life. And
really, when you were younger,
so obviously I did a lot when I was in high school.
But I imagine that in high school using psychedelics, that there was more of the impetus was more recreation, or no?
Listen. Well, certainly my relationship now as a middle-aged man is very different than it was, and I have what feels more responsible. But honestly, I wouldn't take away any of the experience that I had in high school. Look, recreational. Like I did some of it at concerts, and sometimes with, I do a lot with friends, and we would. We'd laugh all night. So there was a lot of that. But look, the psychedelics back then, and I would do them in big doses, which I don't want to do now in my life. I totally respect people doing big doses, but I just didn't. Back then, I would do the big doses, and it turned. You know what it did for me, man? I'm growing up in the suburbs. I've got all kinds of mental experiences and feelings that I don't really feel like other people have. The questions that I want to ask about the world, like I don't even know what those questions are. Something feels off. Occasionally I want to kill myself. Things are hard. I lost, was drinking a lot, and I used to be popular, and then I'm not popular. I'm suffering that. Wondering what it means to be a man inside my skinny, non-muscled body. Wondering why I had no girlfriends in high school. Wondering. And I'm heterosexual, so I wanted when I can, all this stuff, right? Like feeling very low. Psychedelics were like, there's another world out there, and I felt like I was onto a secret. Like, things are not stable. I remember being at somebody's place where they had drawn sperm on the wall, and I start tripping, and the sperm is swimming. And I thought, I kept blinking, being like, that can't be swimming, right? Like, blinking, like, that can't be. And I was like, it's swimming. And I realized the stability of it that I thought was there is not there. The reality is much more liquidy. And that was very potent. Like, it helped me feel like there was a bigger universe than the one that I was growing up in. And I also had, and I won't go into it, but I talk about it in that Psychosis in Ecology video. I also had an out-of-body experience with Earth, with Gaia, with Mother Earth, that profoundly altered the course of my life too, and allowed me to walk away from my religious upbringing, which was necessary for me. I respect if people want to stay religious, but that was like, I had this very transcendent, powerful experience that allowed me to become very literally a new person. So, huge fan.
Yeah. To me, it's like, with mushrooms in particular, that's where my most extensive experience is with psilocybin mushrooms. It's like you mentioned, it gives you this awareness of the liquidity of life. To me, the term I use, but I think it's along the same lines, the same messaging, is like, it's like all of a sudden you put on these, when you're on mushrooms, you put on these glasses. And to me, it's like I'm seeing the vibrational nature, the vibrational energetic nature of existence. Like, everything is resonating at some sort of frequency. And like we go throughout our world in normal consciousness, and it's like, oh, that's a stationary rock, or, that's a tree, or, that's my ceiling of my roof. And then all of a sudden you're on mushrooms, and it's like you put on this glasses that allows you to like see deeper into physical reality. And to see, holy shit, there's actually something going on that's much deeper than on the surface of what we perceive as physical reality. And not only can I perceive there's something much different than the physical reality that I'm seeing, I'm actually inexorably connected to that physical reality. Like, the energy that's vibrating in my ceiling, that I can literally see, like, the energy in my ceiling, I am part of that energy. Like, that me and the roof are kind of the same thing. And I'm always left with, after a psilocybin experience, with this notion that, like, this almost like telepathic notion, not that I'm like, think that I'm communicating telepathically with someone, that we're like having a conversation via our minds, but that like I am inexorably connected to every single living being. That like, maybe maybe this Alex form takes like kind of like this tall, blonde, bro-y looking form, but like I am actually the exact same thing as that little Mexican lady selling tamales on the corner. Like, she is just kind of like a different branch of the same tree that I am. And I'm always left with that palpable notion.
And look, that's what these plants are here for. These plants, they did not evolve for humans. They've been around for tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of years. They're here for species. Other species use them. Moths, caribou, goats. Other species use ants use psychoactive substances, and it opens their consciousness, because plants have consciousness, and so do bugs, so do bacteria. It opens their consciousness to kind of extra perceptory ways of understanding their environment, and that's a very, very, very useful, product and fungi on Earth. So that species can grow. I mean, you need that. And that's how it's been in our lives. It sounds like we've grown by having extrasensory perceptions, and so does Earth. So there's hundreds of them everywhere on all continents except for Antarctica. So they're part of the Earth system, the body of Earth, and they belong here, and they're powerful. They're wonderful. And they're dangerous too, but I don't like to harp on that. I just feel like there's way too much focus on the danger. And I'm also a big fan of people taking extraordinary risks. Like, look, yes, I've had a bad trip.
Yes.
I've taken
Thank you for saying that.
I've taken way too much, but getting back to the privilege, I mean, that has to be accounted for. I mean, one has to be looking at their environment and how people are going to react to them, all that stuff. So with that said, I mean, I've taken massive doses and almost lost my mind. Actually, have lost my mind. So, and almost done completely crazy things. But look, I wouldn't trade them. I mean, I just feel like that this is so. And these, look, I'm about to be presenting at a conference on madness and psychedelics, and that conference is going to get at some of the nuances of this stuff. Because so there does need to be more in-depth conversations, because some of the experiences you have while on psychedelics are very similar to the kinds of experiences you have if you undergo what we call psychosis. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's also potential for people who might have what we call psychosis, for psychedelics to be a useful force in their life to help them better navigate some of that stuff. I picture this world where, like, if you're 16 and you take psychedelics and you go through, your mind goes way out there, and you're having all these hallucinogenic experiences. If you can learn to navigate that, hey, if you've got a guide that can help you navigate that terrain, then if later in life you have a breakdown and you start being in extra realities or alternate realities, you're going to have some familiarity with it. So actually, it's funny because the whole psychiatric community is saying we can't give these drugs to people with diagnoses of bipolar. Fuck you guys. First of all, these plants don't belong to you. Like, y'all don't get to say who can take these plants. But the second thing is, why don't we look at it like actually it could be a really useful way for people to understand those altered realities. And like some of the plants can tip people over into a more permanent state of madness, and that has to be accounted for. But it's but that's all problematic to even say that. And in any case, it's not a large portion of people that would happen to. So I'm excited about there being much more conversation. I'm really worried about them being controlled by psychiatry and psychology. I just think that's a terrible idea, but that's the way it's going to go. Yep. And I just hope that a lot of other people are able to access them outside of that, outside of being on a couch therapist with a mask over your eyes. I mean, I think we need to be taking more risks right now. The planet's fucking unraveling, and we need new consciousnesses to emerge and listen to the consciousnesses that are around right now that have really novel ideas about how to live on the planet.
Yeah. And you mentioned the danger thing, and certainly, I mean, they come with their own risks, psychedelics. Dude, I grew up in suburban Atlanta in the same environment essentially you grew up in. We went to essentially replica high schools in replica towns. I went off to the University of Georgia, graduated from the University of Georgia. I've always been a social guy. I've never had issues ever making friends or finding a social group or any of that. I say all that to say I've done plenty of partying. I've done plenty of alcohol drinking, of copious amounts, plenty of binge drinking. I've used plenty of synthetic party drugs. I've done a lot of partying. And this whole, for anyone to say that psychedelics are dangerous, and yet you can go down to any corner store in any city, any town in America, you don't need to walk or drive more than 5 minutes before you can pick up a drug and alcohol that will provide you, that will entirely obliterate your consciousness. Like if there's the most powerful drug I've ever experienced, the most powerful sense of intoxication I've ever experienced is alcohol, by far. There's no crazier drug out there. There's no crazier, wild, out of control experience, more manic, madness-inducing experience than fucking pounding, 12 Bud Lights, or in my case, when I was in college, 20 of them, and then the danger of them, like, you can take as many mushrooms as you want or smoke as much weed as you want. You're not going to fucking OD and die. I could go down to the corner store a quarter mile from my house here in LA and for $20 buy enough alcohol to kill me by tomorrow morning. It's
right.
It's
and things like
go ahead.
Well, things like domestic violence is, a lot of people that
rape.
Yeah, they're drunk. Yeah. So I mean, exactly. Is it that what you're saying is spot on. And I mean, that's not going to change because they have lobbies. I mean, this is the whole problem with our politics being captured by corporate capitalism is once you got a lobby, you're in, and you're just, like, so we'll never change that. But, which is ridiculous. But if we're going to have it legal that you can go down to the store and buy Jim Beam, I believe we should have it legal that you can go and buy a psychedelic. But I'm not 100% here, but I'm pretty much also believe that we should make psychiatric drugs, Prozac, Seroquel, you name it. We should just put those in CVS and anyone can go buy them.
I
giving
the
power to
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more.
I think, yeah, and opiates even, and that's really people would think you're crazy, but anyways, that's another podcast. But I just think
totally
these are. We don't need to put the guard of psychiatry in front of these kinds of things. I don't believe, or even doctors. I mean, look, I should be able to go get Celebrex for my autoimmune disease. I should be able to go pick it up and buy it over the counter. Instead, I got to do this whole fucking dance with Western doctors, get the prescription. It's terribly expensive. And I'm just like, look, I want to change my body. We need to be raising people to be more responsible, or not responsible, but to have more ways of thinking about the relationship with drugs. Like, it would have been a lot better for me when I was 16 if people were talking about how do you want to have a relationship with LSD. I didn't have any of that, so I just was figuring it out, and it would have been a lot cooler to be thinking about it stronger. So I think you can do that when you sort of take away these artifices or the authorized state from deciding who gets these products and who doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, and not even to mention with the whole legalization of psychiatrics or the over-counterness of psychiatric, it's like, in my particular, just as to piggyback on that point, I move around and I travel a lot. Like, I'm a nomad, and I've been on Prozac throughout my adult life. Every time you do that, you have to reestablish a Prozac source that is a whole song and bureaucratic dance in order for you to get this medicine. And once you're on it, if you're on 40 milligrams of Prozac living in Washington, D.C., and you decide to move to Los Angeles, and then all of a sudden, and you have a 30-day supply in your backpack when you move to L.A., and then a month later you don't have any more, you are, talk about an actual psychiatric episode or actual mental illness or madness or whatever. You can't just stop taking that Prozac.
You just
I'm glad stop taking 40 milligrams of Prozac because, you don't have a primary care physician or a psychiatrist or, God forbid, medical insurance for you in order to procure that Prozac, you are fucked. You are fucked.
Most people, some people can go cold turkey, but most people can't, and you're absolutely right.
Now, I certainly have never been able to.
Well, and I'm glad you're saying it because doctors don't say this. They're starting to, but barely. And yeah, it's a huge problem. The other thing is that to go get your Prozac in LA or wherever, you have to show up and you have to parrot the mental illness story to a provider. I've got depression. And so every time we do that, we're reproducing and reinforcing this idea of sick people. And I just, like I said before, I think that in the aggregate leads to worse outcomes.
Yeah. Okay, last question. I remember there was a quick, when you were talking about ecology and a return to nature, I had a question in my head, but I kept listening to you and I lost the question. There was a quick pause there. I couldn't remember my question. It was, and you may just, pass on this question altogether, but I'll be interested to hear your perspective if you have one. Do you think the current pandemic that we're embroiled in right now is a result of essentially what you were saying is civilization has run amok?
Yeah, it's I don't know if I have the right way of talking about it in a way that feels honest enough because I'm still very much a novice in learning about ecology. But look, nature has mechanisms built into her, and in order to survive well, and when you cross those thresholds, you start to see reactions. And they're very complex. It's not like a singular reaction like, oh, we took too much from this river here, therefore we have this virus. It's not like that. But yeah, things, we're saying that pandemics were not really a problem with hunter-gatherer culture. They're mostly a problem after we started farming. And, so that it's a consequence of the way that human beings use the earth and in part because of the numbers of people, like it allows for like a virus like that to transmit a lot easier. And obviously we have a global transmission system now. And so, yeah, I mean, the virus pops up, it gets transmitted all around the world. I think there's a way of looking at it like this is a defensive posture by Earth because Earth is, she's mentally ill. No, I'm not going to say it. Earth is being sickened, and these are the kinds of reactions that we can expect. And, I would look at a hurricane in the same way. And
right.
So I think it's part of the thing. Look, ecologically, everyone's focused on carbon. I mean, but if we're going to focus on some element, we need to focus on water. The water vapor is way more potent of a greenhouse gas than carbon, way more. But people don't talk about it because it's very complicated, and so the scientific community decided to kind of go with carbon because people can understand that better. But water is this huge thing. Yeah, but water is this huge thing with heating. But let's just take the heating out of it. The water cycle around the earth, which is, trees making calling in water by creating these low pressure systems where they literally call in clouds from the ocean. They drink the water, they give it back to their neighbors, and that gets transmitted all the way into the interior of a continent, and then that wets the Colorado River, which then gives all the water to the beavers who make dams, and then all of the water transmission going on the planet is much, when you think about it like our circulatory system in our own bodies, it's this highly, highly, highly important, it's the most vital thing in my view, and we have devastated the water cycle. So as we've done that, all of these reactions by Earth, like hurricanes, but also like viruses, we're going to see in fires. I mean, if we had a wet California like it was before colonization, Central California was so wet that you could ride a canoe hundreds of miles without getting out from Kern County in Southern California all the way up to what we call the Bay Area. It was a wet world. That's gone. That's because of colonization. And, if we had the wet world like that, if indigenous people and their cultural practices of intentionally setting fires were still going, we're not going to see the kinds of devastating fire impact that we currently have. But we have this dry California. Indigenous people have mostly been kept from doing what they've known for thousands of years in terms of working with fire in the land. And so we get these reactions. So I just wanted to say that because I think as we think about, like, as human beings start thinking more and more about, like, shit, like, nature really does have some limits here. I hope that this conversation can start to really focus on water. That we need to free the rivers. We need to be regenerating forests who transmit water. We need to be thinking about water as like this very primary source of keeping the planet healthy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, the way I look at all this is, it seems the notion I always hear about why there's not progress in terms of ecological rights, I guess is the term that just came to me, more of a focus on nature. It's because what I always hear is like, well, because we don't experience it in our lifetime, we're not hit in the face with it on a daily basis. It's a collective action problem. No one's going to take action because right now we do have water that comes out of the faucet. And yes, maybe the air is polluted, but, and the ice caps are melting, but like we're not all, being submerged by melted glacier water. The problem is kind of more distant in the future. So that's why we don't take action. The whole COVID thing is very interesting though, and once again, I'm certainly not a virologist. I'm certainly not an ecologist. And to be quite frank, I do very little research of any kind. I spend much more time watching cage fighting than I do researching ecology. I'll put it that way. But it seems to me this whole COVID thing is Mother Nature being like, listen, motherfuckers, there are way too many of you guys, and you are treating me like shit. So some of y'all, and I know this sounds super callous because it's, you know, the weak and it's the infirm and the elderly and the weak of our society that are most impacted by this. But this is what it seems like to me, Mother Nature being like, some of y'all got to go. Or like, so you got to change the way you're doing it. You said it when I first asked the question. It's a defensive posture by Mother Nature, or a reaction by Mother Nature to be like, y'all are fucking with me right now. And, you know, this is my way of kind of pushing back. That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I would describe that the Earth is intentionally doing this. I think of it more like I believe Earth has a consciousness, just like you have a consciousness. And when you get sick, when your liver gets sick, there's processes in your body that are going to try and handle that, and those intelligences are run by all kinds of complicated cells and bacteria and fungi. So I think, you know, I don't think Mother Earth wants us gone. I think we were made by the planet for a reason. I think that, you know, we're just as beautiful and valuable as an elephant and as a like as a salamander. But I think that here's the thing. This is, to me, is not necessary. If there was 8 billion elephants on the planet, then their species would start collapsing too. And so I just think that this is so it's not, it doesn't single us out. It's just we happen to have overshot everything, or dominant culture has, at least, and without the respect that's necessary. And the last thing I'll say about that, I mean, population is a complicated issue too, and I do talk about it in my video about cities, because, you know, there's a racist history to it. So it has to be talked about. And some people say we can't talk about population because of the racist history, and I totally disagree with that. I think that's ecologically ignorant. I think, like, this isn't about, like, how this has been talked about in the past. This is about, we can't have 8 billion elephants. We can't have 8 billion human beings. That's not the way. There's not an ecological way to do that. And so I think that the conversation has to happen, but it has to be done with a lot of care. And I'm glad to see this is starting to creep in again to the dialogue, that people are starting to say, look, I mean, we're everywhere. We're everywhere across the globe. And, you know, and people rightly point out that there's a lot of people that don't use a lot of Earth because they're living in materially poor conditions, although they might be living in ecologically rich conditions. And so that's another one of the nuances. It's like, you know, the striking problem is that people in the first world have way too much shit, have too many things, and there's too many. Yeah. So it's not necessarily about how many bodies there are, although I think that is part of it. It's also what does it take to make that body? I mean, to make my body, I've got an Nalgene body, I've got shoes, I've got a fucking car, and, like, you know what I mean? Like, it just ends up being this complete, So blah.
No, that was a much better way to put it than me saying that Mother Nature is killing us all, is murdering us all.
Well, and at the end of the day, I mean, I think these are, like, who knows? I mean, so I like that. I like that these dialogues are happening, because it's very. I mean, look, if Earth has a consciousness, then there ain't no way I'm really going to understand that kind of level of complexity. Yeah.
Stephen, man, thank you so much for doing this, bro. This when I loved to do this podcast, I'm glad you did. I loved it too. Honestly, like, this is the most enjoyable 2 hours I've had in months. And my life has been, you know, relatively good. So that's, you know, this is very enjoyable 2 hours. But I just want to say, when I set out to do this podcast, man, I didn't really quite know why I was doing it. It was much more, the impetus was a sense of discovery of self. And I just had, like, this yearning impetus to get to know, I guess, myself better by hearing the life stories of my closest family and friends. And so this all started with me after I taught my last school year at the end of the 17-18 school year. You know, I left my job at the school I was teaching at in DC, and just packed up my stuff and spent several months traveling around the country, going to family and friends' houses, sitting with them in their living room, and basically just pressing record on this recorder and saying, hey, tell me your life story, with no clear purpose or plan. Just I felt the impetus to do so. But all along, this kind of this idea of having much more profound and directed discussions about topics that I feel like aren't being discussed enough, that kind of notion started to develop. And truly, this interview right here that I've just done with you is exactly what I want to do with this little passion project, podcast, or whatever you want to call it. You know, this is exactly what I want to do. And this conversation with you that we've just had really feels like a transition point from kind of like chapter 1 of this effort, where I was just basically kind of getting to know myself via family and friends, by getting to know family and friends' life story, now to transition to much more conversation about reality. And this feels like the transition point. This was certainly the most profound conversation I've had thus far. And like, I don't know, talking to you right now makes me feel like I'm doing exactly what I should be doing with, you know, my time here on Earth. So I want to thank you so much for that.
Oh, that's great.
All of this means a ton to me. This means so much to me that you did this. And you are exactly what I wanted. And so thank you so much. I think you're a truly remarkable and powerful, profound human being. And we need more people like you on planet Earth, in my opinion, quite frankly. So keep being you, dude. I know, you know, you've experienced struggles, both physical and mental, throughout your life, but I think there's a reason for that. I think the course of humanity is one of progress, and certainly we hit bumps on the road, but I think progress is fueled by struggle, and I think your personal struggles are promoting a much broader progress of humanity than I think you even realize. Even though you're deep into it, you know, I think your struggle is promoting progress, and I feel super fortunate to have been just a little piece of, hopefully, part of that progress. So thank you for being you, and keep being wonderful. You, dude. Keep being you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I really got a lot of energy. I especially appreciated that we could just reconnect after so many years and have a 3-hour conversation that was totally energizing. I love talking about this stuff, and I also love hearing the kind of questions that you're asking of the world. And I felt this years ago when we met, you know, like I felt a lot less alone in the world, like, you know, because we've got these kind of parallel things going on. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, dude. I really appreciate this. I wish you the best of luck of everything. And I know I said it again and again, but keep doing your thing, man. You're an important part of this crazy experience that we're all on.
All right. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate that, man.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Peace.